on the season finale of the Haunted Objects podcast.
Who are you?
Who are you? Wait, Dana?
What am I wearing?
Where are we?
I have no idea.
The last thing I remember is we were in that fog.
The electric fog.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
This looks like... Don't tell me. What is that? Oh, no! Are we doing a quantum leap?
I think we're doing a quantum leap right now.
Wait a second. I need a mirror. Oh, no! Dana!
Oh, my God.
They're going to make us talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren.
From deep inside the mysterious archives of the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal, it's the Haunted Objects podcast.
All right, if we're going to do this, let's do this.
In the shadowy world of the paranormal, few names evoke as much fascination and controversy as Ed and Lorraine Warren. Together, the self-taught demonologist and clairvoyant spent decades investigating cases that defy explanation. Cases that would inspire the billion-dollar Conjuring film franchise. From rural farmhouses plagued by unseen forces to families tormented by vengeful spirits, the Warrens claim to confront evil in its most terrifying forms. They documented poltergeists that shattered lives, exorcisms that defied belief, and a demonic doll so powerful it remains locked away to this very day. Or did they? The truth about the Warrens may actually be more frightening than the forces they claim to battle. Were they courageous seekers of the supernatural, or skilled storytellers preying on fear? Perhaps the truth lies in these artifacts from their infamous career, where every haunted object hides a secret, and every answer leads to even darker questions.
We're going to do our best today to be as gracious as we can with the material.
I think that what we're going to try to do is we're going to have a nuanced conversation. We're going to have a nuanced conversation about this subject matter, which is a pretty rare thing, genuinely. I don't think a lot of people have a lot of nuanced conversations about Ed and Lorraine Warren.
If you're talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren, most places are either insanely like anti-Ed and Lorraine or insanely pro-Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah.
It usually falls along typically like religious dogma.
Yes.
Is one side or the other is where you fall.
Yes. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because I think that the goal for us is to have a conversation that's nuanced about Ed and Lorraine Warren, but also to have a conversation about Ed and Lorraine Warren as occultists.
Yeah, as
magic,
occultists, as people who deal with this type of stuff from a, I don't know, I would say it's a fairly agnostic view that we have about like ghosts and the unexplained, things like that.
Sure.
Like it's not really tied to a really, really strong sense of belief in anything.
Yes.
So maybe we can actually do this topic justice.
Yeah, maybe we can traverse the content in as much of a sort of nuanced way as possible.
Did you grow up reading Ed and Lorraine Warren?
No, I never read any. I have honestly never really consumed much of their content.
I grew up reading Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'll be very honest and say that when I was a kid, I loved Ed and Lorraine Warren. I think, I was a religious kid. I grew up in the church, raised by Baptist minister. So we weren't really allowed to, delve into the occult. And I think Ed and Lorraine Warren, their books, whether it was, Ghost Hunters or Graveyard or whatever, those books allowed me to, quote unquote, safely dabble in the occult.
Oh, so that was your first sort of like, oh, this is a safe entry point for me.
Right. Sure. They think all of it is evil, but at least I can have those adventures too. I can read about this stuff, and my parents are going to be like, "Oh well, they're warriors for God."
Sure.
What kind of words come to your mind when you think of Ed and Lorraine Warren? When that name hits you?
Immediately I think of demonology.
Yes.
I think of haunted objects.
Yes.
I think of Catholicism and the spread of sort of Christianity as a perspective to investigate the paranormal with.
Sure.
I think of a lot of those types of things.
Yeah. I usually think about how irritated I am that people constantly say, you guys are like the new Ed and Lorraine Warren.
We hear that all the time.
Way more often than
we
we're
hear it from
comfortable
people
with.
who don't know what we actually do. And
I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think people see, they're a married couple.
Yeah.
They deal with haunted objects.
Yes.
They have a museum.
Mm-hmm.
They must be like Ed and Lorraine.
Yes.
Except we're
Absolutely
insanely
the opposite.
nothing like them. We have a completely different approach to these things.
Yeah.
We don't just do that.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in demons. I don't really believe in the idea of people being demonically possessed, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not Christian. I'm not Catholic.
It's very, obviously, it's pretty easy for people to jump to that conclusion. But
Sure.
the irony is really when you look at what we do, it's about as far away from what Ed and Lorraine Warren were doing as you possibly can get. I don't think you can get any further, honestly.
You know, here's a fun fact for you. Their last name was actually Miney.
Miney, they changed it?
Yeah, his name was Edward Warren Miney.
Oh my God.
We
I
actually
didn't know
dug up
that.
those records. We found those records.
That is hilarious.
So Warren wasn't even their real last
Miney
name.
definitely doesn't sound like a very demonic or demonologist name.
Here comes demonologist Ed Miney.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, people always relate us to Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally we'll lean into it once in a while. And we did for Halloween one year.
We did.
We did dress up as Ed and Lorraine. It actually looked a little better than we look right now.
Yeah.
And the photos were so good that when Lorraine Warren died, I don't know why it was almost exclusively South American news services.
It was.
Used photos of our Halloween costumes as her obituaries.
Yes, they did.
We'll throw some of those on screen. You can take a look yourself. That was our icebreaker for the tour. That was the first joke we made on tour. We wanted to let everyone know we weren't like Ed and Lorraine. And when we showed that, it always got uproarious laughter everywhere.
Except New England.
Yeah,
exactly.
We were on Ed and Lorraine Warren turf, and I think they did not think that was as funny as we did. Mm-hmm. But I cackled anyway. I thought it was the best. Well, if we're trapped in the Warren universe, we're here, we're in the museum. I don't know. I guess we should just have this conversation.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren. Give you some, I think, hopefully very reasonable examples of what we think was actually going on with Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the controversies. We'll talk about things we almost can promise you've never heard before. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about some objects.
Okay.
We actually do have a few things in our collection, quite a few actually, that are related to Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Yeah.
You see here we have a selection of some paintings we'll get to.
Yeah, we do have a few things like that we've collected throughout the years, and I think that a lot of them are really cool.
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yeah, they're genuinely pieces of paranormal history for sure. And like, we'll be the first ones to tell you, most paranormal history is a little sticky. Let's start with the most famous. When you think of the Ed and Lorraine's haunted objects, what's the first thing you think of?
You obviously think of Annabelle.
Think of Annabelle, the deadly doll.
Yeah.
In 1971, there were a couple nurses in their 20s. One of them, they were roommates. And they were roommates. One of them got a doll as a Christmas gift. And this doll was a Raggedy Ann doll. In fact, we have the exact same version of that doll right here.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like what is it? It's
monstrous.
Yeah, it's a huge Raggedy Ann doll.
You see the scary movie Annabelle. You see the horror movie, and it looks a little bit different. Probably because whoever owns the copyright on the actual Raggedy Ann dolls is like, no, you're not going to say these things are evil and possessed.
Way too expensive. Yeah.
So they also. I don't know. There's something spooky about them, I guess.
I think they're kind of creepy, but I also think they're cute. And they're such like the thing about the Raggedy Ann dolls is if you're a kid from the 80s, you had these like Raggedy Ann and Andy dolls. Most people had them. They were sort of like stuffed dolls that you had. Yeah. It was a thing.
These were very popular back then.
Yeah.
These two nurses, one of them got one as a gift, and they would just leave it at the foot of the bed. They would just sat at the foot of the bed. Until one night, they woke up and noticed that the doll was standing on its own 2 feet at the end of the bed.
I mean,
If you saw this thing standing up at the end of the bed, you'd probably be a little nervous.
Yeah, I'd be real upset. I'd be real sad, real scared. I mean, because it's such a weird shape too. I would have been frightening.
So the boyfriend starts having nightmares.
Yes.
Of the doll standing at the end of the bed.
He does.
And when he wakes up, he starts finding notes in a child's handwriting that say help.
Mm-hmm.
The doll was writing notes. Annabelle was writing notes.
Leaving them hidden all over the apartment.
They brought the doll into the kitchen.
I'm not scared by any of this yet.
No, I mean, it's not that scary.
I mean,
just wait. Just wait.
All right.
They start bringing the doll into the kitchen for 3 days in a row. This woman, the nurse, Donna, she and her roommate, they would actually talk to the doll.
Okay.
They would have conversations with the doll.
Interesting detail. I think that's interesting.
Sure.
They were like engaging with it.
And then what happened is on the third day of having it in the kitchen in the morning, they claim that the doll lifted its hands up and put them on the table by itself.
Okay.
So they all freaked out. They got scared. They called a medium. They called a psychic medium to come in. So this medium shows up and the medium says, there's a little girl named Annabelle who's attached to this doll. And they tried to figure out, why could that be? We don't find out until later. Ed Warren claims a couple different things. He first claims that Annabelle was the spirit of a little girl who died on the property before the nurse's apartment was built. He later claims that it was a little girl who died in a car accident.
Okay, so the story changes at a certain point. There's two different versions of the story is what you're telling me.
Anyway,
okay.
that happens later.
Yeah.
And while they're trying to figure all this out, strange things keep happening in the apartment.
I would say a doll lifted its arms up in the air and stood on their bed and left notes all over the place.
They called a priest first.
Yeah, as you do.
Didn't really do much.
Yeah.
So then they called Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Thank God.
Demonologist.
Well,
they have a priest come in, do a minor exorcism, basically blesses the apartment, blesses the house.
Cleansing, blessing.
Lorraine claims that the evil is gone.
Okay.
So they feel that the evil has dissipated after this.
Yeah.
But they do say, the doll would probably be best with us. You should give us the doll. Everybody's seen those famous photos of Lorraine Warren holding the doll, taking it into the house. On the way home, taking it home, they experienced a ton of car trouble. And what they ended up doing is, while Ed's driving the car, he turns around and he pulls out a bottle of holy water and he splashes it all over the doll in the back seat. Suddenly she calms down.
All right. So then the car worked right.
Then the car worked right.
Interesting, if true.
Wasn't swerving. Everything was fine. They made it home just fine. One of the things that they said, writing about Annabelle in the future, and this was interesting. No, the doll is not possessed. Spirits don't possess things. Spirits possess people. Instead, the spirit is simply moving the doll around, giving it the illusion of being alive.
So you're saying Ed Warren himself said that spirits don't possess objects; they possess people.
Yes,
that they just pick the objects up and they're moving them around the environment.
This is old information. This is like early career stuff.
Yeah.
So right at the front, at the get-go, you have them saying, well, there's really no such thing as a haunted object. There's no such thing as a possessed object.
Not in the way that we think about them, or even especially the way the movie
most of the
depicts
public
them.
thinks about them. Most people, people have asked us all the time, how do the spirits get in those things? We've never really believed that. We think that, these haunted objects are simply just like emanations of a feeling that's attached to something that scared someone, right?
Yeah.
And you can, have all kinds of different things come from that. Ed and Lorraine Warren believed that a demon was literally puppeting these things.
Yes.
So there was nothing attached. There was nothing inside of them. There wasn't a spirit inhabiting them. There was a demon in a green screen suit.
Moving them around.
Moving these things around.
Okay.
So that it gave the impression that they were alive.
It's so funny because it's definitely not the perspective that you immediately think of when you think of like Ed and Lorraine Warren and haunted objects. You're just it's such a it's an interesting take that I think often gets overlooked.
Well, this gets interesting because we have a quote here from the Catholic News Agency. This is from 2017. They, when these movies started coming out, the Annabelle films started coming out, the Catholic Church expressed a little skepticism in the story. And you need to understand, Ed and Lorraine Warren claimed.
They did?
Ed and Lorraine Warren claimed to work with the Catholic Church.
They did.
Quite often on behalf of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
One of the things that Ed liked to claim is that he was the only
lay demonologist.
Lay demonologist sanctioned by the Catholic Church.
Yes.
And what lay means, it just means regular person.
Yeah.
The Catholic News Agency had an interview with a Catholic priest trained in exorcisms to ask them, like, what's the deal with, things like Annabelle? And what they said was that, quote, he was adamant that an exorcist would never leave the object intact. If they really did think that there was something going on with this, it would not be left intact to be found by someone in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, you would take the curse off of the object, he explained, and then you would burn it or take it apart. It would be decommissioned somehow. Funny story.
Yeah.
Sounds a lot like what we found out about the Cracking Man.
It does.
A haunted clown doll that we've talked about in season 1 of this podcast. They would often bless these things, and when they were done with them, they would burn them.
People all the time, they ask us constantly, why don't you just burn this stuff? Why don't you literally burn it? And that must be where the origin of that kind of comes from, at least sort of in modern times, the way that we think about it.
The story of Annabelle lives on. Even to this day, Annabelle is still around.
Yeah.
Again, there's a whole movie series, spin-off series of the Conjuring films based on Annabelle. Looks quite a bit different, a lot spookier.
Yeah.
Totally
just moved her
different.
head, though.
Totally different history. And Ed and Lorraine Warren, they're both deceased. They've been gone for a while. But yet Annabelle still is making appearances around the country.
Yeah, Annabelle's still touring.
Annabelle is still touring. You can actually, I know this sounds like I'm making this up, like this is a joke, but it's not. Quite often they have spaghetti dinners where you can go, you pay a few $100, I guess, and you can go and sit down and have a spaghetti dinner with other paranormal enthusiasts while Annabelle is in her box.
Just like,
along with other items from the Warren Museum.
Yeah.
And you get to walk, they have like a red velvet rope, and you get to walk and see some of these things, and then have quite literally the cheapest meal anyone could possibly make.
Yeah.
Pasta.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I think it's all run by...
The image of it is just so... I kind of, like, here's the thing. I'm not being a hater when I say, like, I want to do this so bad. You have no idea how
you
bad
want to go have a spaghetti dinner with
Annabelle? I want to have
spaghetti
dinner with Annabelle.
Well, you can. I think they do
I
them.
just need $300.
They can do them quite often. I'm pretty sure that it's Ed and Lorraine's son-in-law who runs them now.
Yeah.
In fact, NESPR, N-E-S-P-R, the New England Society for Psychic Research, founded by Ed and Lorraine. I think that he runs it. There's another guy, Daniel Rivera, I think is his name, who made a new case for Annabelle, so it was easier to travel around with her. They made it in the style of the same type of thing, but they put prayers inside of it. I remember watching years ago when they were transferring Annabelle to her new case. They had these like oven mitts, or no, I think what they are is I think they're like they're worn by like game wardens and game officers when they have to pick up animals.
Yeah, or like, yeah, exactly. So that you can't get bit through the gloves.
Yes.
Or scratched through the gloves.
Yes. And they have, the gloves have crosses that have been like sewn on them. And then they have saint medals that they put in the fingertips so that you can handle the not possessed doll.
Yeah.
The Ed straight up said is not possessed.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with the doll itself. So that you can handle it safely and effectively. You need those oven mitts to move it around. All of the things that they did to the new box is done in order to, quote, contain the evil of Annabelle in this case. And then he related it to like having a shock collar for a dog. By the way, shock collars are cruel.
Yeah.
You shouldn't use them on your dog. That's a cruel thing to do.
Please stop abusing your animals.
Don't abuse your animals.
Yeah.
Don't abuse your haunted objects either. Don't abuse your haunted objects.
Yeah.
I feel like
I can Carl do like a vein throbbing on my forehead count as we go throughout this episode. Can Carl get a close up of my eye twitching or some?
Anyway, that's Annabelle. That's like the true story behind what actually happened. It's not as kind of convoluted.
That's the thing with all of these stories is that you have to differentiate between if it's become a film in recent years and any like bits of information that are relevant about these cases from back when they were happening. Because the other thing is that the Warrens were intentionally advertising themselves. They were, building these stories into things that maybe, I don't know, we don't really know what the truth of them were. So I'm always really curious to see sort of some of the origins of these things and little bits and pieces of information, like the fact that Ed literally is recorded as saying like, no, they don't possess
haunted.
the objects. They're just sort of picking them up and moving them around.
Which is so weird because I feel like it dismantles their entire career immediately, where it's like, well, why do you need to hang on to them? Why do you got to put them in these cases? Why do you got to put rings of salt around them if they're not haunted and they're just... Because if it's a demon that's manipulating them, like it'll just go and pick another toy. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
In the movies, they say that it was a satanic cult that was responsible for the doll. They snuck into the house.
All of those satanic cults that exist.
These guys, you'll come to find out.
Frustrating.
Ed and Lorraine loved satanic cults. They love satanic cults.
I'm going to literally rip my hair out by the end of this episode.
If Annabelle showed up, if somebody's, and we've done it a million times.
What would you do?
People give us haunted dolls all the time.
I want to know what you would have done.
Some that they believe there are like the spirits of kids attached to them. I don't know. Treat them respectfully. Yeah. Say, hey, I get it. What do you need? How can I help you? Mm-hmm. What do you need?
Yes.
It's the first thing we say to anybody, whoever is like, I got a ghost in my house. What do I do? Talk to it.
Yeah, what do they need?
Yeah. Don't be scared of it.
What are the circumstances of this situation?
What an amazing thing. What an amazing, incredible thing. That something from the other side, whatever it is, whether it's coming from inside you or outside of you, comes to you and says, I need your help. What do? You call people who want to put it in a ring of salt and torture it with a quote unquote dog shock collar? That's insane.
Crazy.
That's a crazy thing.
Yeah. Yes.
Be nice to your haunted object.
From the drop, we have to remember that for the most part, these people are coming into these circumstances, I think, assuming that much of what they're connecting with or communicating with or having interactions with are evil. Like kind of constantly. It was like, that was the baseline, was sort of like approaching it from that perspective.
Yeah, if you start from that angle, you're going to find everything scary and demonically possessed and evil.
Yes.
Because I really do think most people who are experiencing paranormal phenomena, that's for them.
Yeah.
That's a gift for them from either themselves or something outside themselves that's trying to get them to like think a different way or do something differently, or maybe look at something in a new way. I think that most of the time people should figure it out themselves.
Yeah.
But if somebody gives these things to us, we're happy to take them and then treat them very nicely. Because to me, if you believe that these things have some sort of a consciousness and they're asking you for help, what a nasty thing it would be to do, to be like, no, you're evil. Yeah. We're going to lock you up and not help you.
It seems so reductive. It seems very limited.
If we want to talk about the movie for a second, we actually have the cast of Annabelle's head from the movies, from the actual Annabelle movies.
Much scarier than the Raggedy Ann doll.
Oh, way scarier.
Yeah, the Annabelle doll itself is kind of terrifying and very evil and scary looking.
Yeah.
Already, like from the drop. Yeah.
But they had to make it that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, even James Wan himself is like, listen, I'm making scary movies.
He's making horror movies.
The director of him is like, I'm just, this is a good story. And I will say about the films, perfectly casted.
Oh yeah, they're great. I love the first one. I think the first one's
movie.
great. It's actually legitimately really scary. It got me.
If you can separate, the truth from the fiction. Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun story. It's really well told and great casting. Yeah. Patrick Wilson, Vera Farmiga. Yeah, incredible casting. Yeah, you don't see too many movies where you see like a really good love story inside of a horror film. Yeah, and they're very likable, attractive people. So they really sell those two characters. They do. All right, I'm going to put Annabelle down. Okay. I'm going to leave her down here. Yeah. Maybe we'll see her later.
When the paranormal lurks in every shadow, and each mysterious artifact hides a ghostly tale, one show dares to uncover the truth. The Haunted Objects Podcast. Now you can wear the mystery. Introducing the official Haunted Objects merchandise. Hats, shirts, pins, and more. All designed by independent artists, manufactured by small businesses, and carrying the undeniable essence of the unexplained. Embrace the legend. Wear the mystery. Visit planetweird.store today.
All right, let's back up for a minute.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how in the world these two people, and they seemed like normal folks, like anything you see, like they always stress to people, hey, we're just normal people like you.
Yeah, they looked like normal people. I mean, they kind
did.
of looked a little bit like Satanists, I'm not going to lie. But for the most part...
Maybe that's why they were so obsessed with satanic cults.
Maybe.
Anyway,
Yeah.
a good way into this, a good segue into this is actually this painting right here that we have.
Yes, it's
we have
perfect.
a couple of them. We have a plate, and we have this one that was what Ed referred to as a barn door painting. If you're watching the video podcast, which you should be, youtube.com/planetweird, please come and subscribe. This is a barn door painting, they call it. So it's this painting that's on this, like, yeah, it doesn't really look like a barn door.
No.
But it's a painting of, like,
It's rustic.
yeah, an idyllic.
It looks like it's like a New England scene.
It's like an old barn.
Yeah,
it looks like it's an old red barn.
Yeah, it's a little spooky.
Not a hint of ghosts.
No, not really.
There's
I think I only think it's spooky because I know Ed Warren painted it.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's not something weird about it. I think that people who are weird people who make art imbue that stuff into their art, and I think that you can feel it. I think that happens quite a bit.
Yeah.
This one is no different. When we got this from a private collector out of New York back in 2018. When this thing showed up, we noticed that when we opened it from the box, it had a bunch of salt.
It did.
What would be the significance of that? There was salt all over it.
It's likely that they were throwing salt around the space, and it probably just over the years, some of that salt collected. Salt being used often for purification. People will use it for protection. It's a great tool for those types of magic.
Yeah.
But, obviously salt is something that you hear about quite a bit when it comes to the paranormal. You hear about holy water, you hear about salt. Those are the kind of like go-to tools that people can use. So it's likely that they were probably salting the museum space or wherever they had this, they were actively kind of salting the space to keep that energy from getting too stagnant.
So maybe somebody did think that this painting was haunted, or that it did have something spooky around it.
Somebody did, yeah.
When we started to investigate it after it showed up, the first thing that we said was like, well, this has got salt all over it. Maybe there is something weird here. So, we did some investigations. You can watch those if you're a museum member.
Yeah.
Patreon.com/paramuseum. You can check out the Artifact Arrival video. We did an EVP session with it. There were some interesting responses. Maybe we can play some here.
That's a whole sentence, and that's a whole sentence.
The reason that these paintings don't have anything spooky in them is because it didn't start as a spooky thing. We should talk about Ed Warren. Let's talk about Ed real quick and his history. Believe it or not, Ed Warren was raised Catholic.
Shockingly. You might be shocked to know.
You might be shocked to find out.
Yeah.
Ed Warren was raised Catholic. He saw ghosts when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And he said he had a memory. He recalled one time that he had a memory about being about 8 years old and overhearing a priest talk about performing exorcisms. And he thought, that is what I need to do.
Yeah. He was
I need to be doing this type of work. He was fascinated by that type of stuff.
Yeah.
He met Lorraine when he was working at a movie theater.
Yeah, she was going to a movie with her friends.
She was going to a movie with their friends. He was 16, and they both had an interest in the paranormal.
I think that's a cute detail that, like, they both kind of were interested in spooky things, and that was something that they came together over, which is kind of a cute thing. I mean, so like
that's how we met.
That's how we met. I think that's very cute. It's very endearing. It makes them very likable. It makes them, you know, you can recognize what's going on there.
Believe it or not, Lorraine Warren was raised Catholic.
Shockingly.
But there is something interesting about Lorraine. Lorraine claimed that she had psychic abilities, even very young. Yeah. That she saw auras and she could feel vibrations and she could get psychic impressions off of things, which... Now, here's the thing. I was raised Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
You don't
know what the rules are?
At least when I was a kid, you know, what I knew was that you weren't supposed to dabble in psychics and you weren't supposed to like consult mediums. That type of stuff was the devil trying to trick you. Yeah. I don't know. Catholics, sound off in the comments. I feel like
Catholics are also as strict as
I
Baptists
don't know if that's a thing. Were you allowed to consult mediums as Catholics?
Dear Catholics, please let us know. Were you allowed to talk to ghosts and demons and Annabelle dolls?
Well, when Ed got back, he served in the Navy in World War II. Mm-hmm. When he got back from the Navy, he attended Perry Art School, and he had 3 different sources of income at the time. He was a bus driver. Yeah. So he drove a bus for the local high school. Yeah. And he was also doing painting lessons. Mm-hmm. He was giving people painting lessons. And he was selling these barn door paintings.
Yes.
That was something that he was very well known for. In fact, even to this day, out in Connecticut, if you go thrifting, there's a very good chance you might come across one of these. Mm-hmm. If you do, you should buy it because these things they go for thousands of dollars online.
Yeah, every time a Conjuring movie comes out.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's only one more being made. So go, if you're in New England, go to those thrift stores, look at the paintings. You might find an Ed Warren painting. So that's how he made his money. Yeah. He made his money doing that. And then what he started to do is he started to travel around New England and he would find... idyllic countryside scenes. Yeah. And he would paint these types of scenes, much like this one. And then he would sell them to people out of his studio.
Yeah. I mean, again, kind of neat, like traveling around, getting a sense for where he lived, doing art of the place that he like. It's obviously there's a bit of a poetic soul there a little bit. You can tell this is somebody who like really enjoys the act of creating things.
He's an artist.
Yeah, he's an artist.
This painting that we have is called Winter Farm Homestead, and it was dated 1967. This painting came out the year before Ed and Lorraine Warren did their first ghostly lecture.
Yes. So you'll notice that just like you mentioned from this photo or from this painting, there really isn't much that's very spooky about it.
No. It's just a normal. Classic. These were sold to tourists. Yep. New England tourists who came to New England.
But suddenly a year later,
things change.
We
have a 1969 article here that says, a longtime resident of Monroe, Mr. Warren is an established artist and art teacher known for his barn door paintings, which are done on natural pine with oil paint. Although he has always specialized in New England landscapes and seascapes, it now develops that he has long been at work on a private collection of paintings that embody his impressions of supernatural events.
So this is so cool. This is one of the very first times that Ed Warren is openly in the general public, at the very least in the media, kind of starting to develop an identity or a brand. You're starting to see a brand happen. You're starting to see him put together this idea. And so this is the first moment here in 1969 where you finally have Ed Warren's name attached to and associated with the word supernatural, right? So here we go. This is when it starts. This is when it all takes off.
So the way that this would work, the way that Ed started to get his foot in the door is he would find haunted houses. Yeah. He would look through the newspaper to see if he could find stories of haunted houses, or because he drove the high school bus, he would ask the kids on the bus.
What's the local ghost stories?
What are the ghost stories?
Yeah.
Great people to ask, by the way.
Yeah, teenagers?
Teenagers know.
Yeah.
They tell these stories. Some of them know that their friends live in haunted houses.
Yeah, especially if you live in a small town, you know all your local folklore and all of your urban legends, all that fun stuff. He and
Lorraine developed this like brilliant scheme. And what they would do is Ed would ask around, he'd ask the high school kids if he could find haunted houses.
Yeah.
What he would do is he and Lorraine would go and they would very conspicuously set up outside of the houses. Ed would bring his easel and his paints, And Lorraine would stand there and describe, the things that she was psychically picking up on from these houses. And as they were painting, people would naturally become curious.
Yeah.
So someone would come out of the house and they would be like,
why are you painting my house?
Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah.
And he would be like, well, my wife is psychic and she knows that your house is haunted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm painting the spirits that are in your home.
Yeah.
And these people would be like, really? So not only could he potentially sell them a painting, but he could potentially get inside that house
and learn more about the story.
That he could, keep for his files for potential books or other lectures in the future. This started, Lorraine said they did that for about 5 years when they first got started. Lorraine did that for about 5 years. They would sell the paintings to the homeowners. That's how they amassed all their ghost stories. And then in 1968, the first year after they started doing this, they gave their first lecture. Their first ghost lecture happened at the Silver Tea and Art Show in Monroe, Connecticut. That art show lecture turned into an invitation to talk to the local high school around Halloween and tell some spooky stories. And that is really where their career takes off.
Yes.
Because most people, even in the films, the Conjuring films, they show them giving lectures at high schools. Or, well, they don't show high schools. They put them in colleges, which that eventually came.
Yeah.
We actually have here, this is an original poster for one of their presentations. So this is it says the Naugatuck High School Student Council proudly presents The Warrens, Seekers of the Supernatural, May 4th at the NHS Auditorium, $5 at the door, 7 to 9:30 p.m.
Incredible.
That's a 2.5 hour lecture.
I mean, they were giving her back then.
That's a long time.
$5 for 2.5 hours. That's kind of a steal.
And it's clearly one of the kids has drawn a spooky ghost.
That's cool.
On it.
I love it. I love that they should have used that font. That looks like a hair metal band from the 80s, which I love.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
So this is one of their original high school lecture posters.
That's so cool.
So they really gave her, like, they were going around giving lectures all the time. That's the thing that they were known for.
Yeah.
In the book, The Demonologist here, there's a quote that says, they embarked on a program of campus lectures wherein they warned students around the country about the dangers of the occult. So already they're starting to get into the satanic panic stuff.
Yeah, here we go. Here comes another eye twitch.
But this is the thing. This is the thing that you should know. That was a later detail. The way that this began, they were only talking about ghosts.
Yes,
they were not talking about demons.
I think this is such an interesting detail, and you'll notice here the dates are very, very interesting.
Pay attention to these dates because when they first started doing this in the late 60s, 68 was when they did their first lecture. When they were doing them through the late 60s, 1970, 1971, 1972, any of the newspaper articles that we can find, they are 95% about ghosts and seances and like psychic investigations.
Yeah.
There's no talk about demons. There's no talk about demonology. There's none of that. None of this dangers of the occult thing. It is like purely, here's some spooky ghost stories, right? So 1971, he's still saying, this is a quote from an article, Warren is a self-taught psychic investigator who hastens to make it clear that he and Lorraine are just normal people.
I love that. So he's calling himself at this point in the game a psychic investigator.
Psychic investigator.
So this is obviously before, referencing yourself as like a ghost hunter or paranormal investigator, a psychic investigator. So there, like, as you say, there's really only that basic kind of idea that they were just investigating ghosts,
just looking for
local legends,
spooky stories. Well, something happened in 1971.
Any horror heads out there?
A book comes out in 1971.
Yeah.
That was very famous.
Very, very influential.
So
on
influential.
The culture.
It's turned into a movie a couple years later. It's a book called The Exorcist.
Yes.
The Exorcist comes out, and the book is a smash hit, so much so that it's immediately picked up, greenlit to make a film. Film is widely lauded as the scariest movie of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it
It holds up
for
still.
sure. Yeah.
It's a very, especially if you were raised with religion, it's a scary movie.
Yeah, yes.
And it had a massive effect on the culture.
It really did. We talked about this before in a previous episode, but even you can see how that film has an impact on the trajectory of the Ouija board.
Oh yeah, up until that point, the Ouija boards were like, they were marketed as things that like kids played at sleepovers.
Yeah.
It was like a date party game.
Yeah, it was like a socializing game.
Yeah.
So you could sit next to people that you wanted to smooch on.
But the minute Captain Howdy shows up,
Captain Howdy
in
f***ed up for everybody.
It becomes a portal to hell. It was in 1973 that for the first time, Ed begins to publicly call himself a demonologist in training.
Mm-hmm.
It was after The Exorcist.
Yes.
So The Exorcist makes an impact. And all of a sudden, Ed is not a psychic investigator anymore.
Now he's a demonologist.
He's a demonologist.
Yes. And he's very excited and really like wants to actively start talking publicly about this subject matter.
We have a quote here from a Jesuit priest who talked about how there was such a huge uptick in people like talking about demons and the demonic after The Exorcist comes out.
Mm-hmm.
He said that for a while, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. They called looking for an instant fix, pleading with me to expel their own demons, their kids' demons, and even their cats' demons.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out cats apparently are very easily possessed. We'll talk about that soon, too.
Yes, yeah.
There's a story about a demonically possessed cat that the Warrens investigated.
Yes.
So anyway, you see the shift there. This very popular thing comes out, all about demons, all about Catholicism. All of a sudden, Ed is not a psychic investigator anymore. Now he's a demonologist.
Yes, there's a definite note here that the vibe changes and it starts to become a little bit more dark, a little bit more focused on things like demons and demonology.
Well, we caught something very interesting while we were doing research on this episode that is worth pointing out. This is Ed and Lorraine were known to make a lot of wild claims. This one might be one of the most wild ones. For those of you who don't know, The Exorcist was based on a true story.
Yes.
This happened not to a little girl, but to a little boy. People still, I think they may have just figured out who he is. The guy's still around. He doesn't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah,
but there's some books out there about it. There's some documentaries that were made. Anyway, here's a quote from Ed Warren. He said, "It was based on a true story of a boy from Mount Rainier, Washington, back in 1949. Okay, this is important.
Yes.
So he says it's from Mount Rainier, Washington in 1949. And Ed claims, saying, I was there, but as a young man, only in my 20s, nobody paid much attention to me. Ed Warren claims that he was there for the exorcism of this young boy who ended up becoming the Exorcist.
Yeah, I mean,
case.
inspiring literally the film.
But here's the thing. Ed's lying. We know he's lying because he specifically says the boy was from Mount Rainier, Washington.
Yeah.
It's actually Mount Rainier, Maryland.
Yeah,
is where this guy was from.
So he got the location wrong when he was telling people.
Just forgot he was on the other side of the country.
Yeah, when he was telling people about it. Wow. Okay.
Make up your own mind about that one, but I think that's funny that Ed says that he was present for like the most famous exorcism of all time. Ed claims that the reason that they didn't call themselves demonologists before that is because it scared people too much.
Sure.
He said the public wasn't ready to hear it. He has a quote in The Demonologist, page 82. As long as we talked about haunted houses and ghosts, people were delighted. When we had to mention demonic spirits, demonology, the devil, or worse, if we brought up Christ or priests or religion, a swell of animosity rose up from the audience as though someone had thrown a switch.
Yeah.
Gee, what changed?
I mean,
maybe they were giving lectures to satanic cults.
I mean, yeah. Well, listen, Ed,
they're all over.
The fact that all of Connecticut is just retired, satanic high priests.
We're here for the demons.
Yeah.
We're here for the ghosts.
We want the good stuff.
So anyway, that changed. Ed claims that it wasn't The Exorcist that did this, the release of The Exorcist. He claims that he was driving home from a lecture and he was talking about how he was going to stop bringing up demonology because he was getting ridiculed for it. And they passed a missionary building off of the Hudson River, and he was like, I'm going to stop and I'm just going to walk in.
Okay.
Weird. So he stops and he walks in. He sees an old priest looking at like old vases, like Chinese vases. And, he starts talking to him and he's like, there's a nun upstairs who's been waiting for you. He's like, what? And so he walks upstairs and he meets this Japanese nun who hands him a book. He said she looked very intelligent. She was about 50 years old. Kind of weird to say that.
Yeah, like I love that you had to like make a point of saying, like, "Oh, a woman looked intelligent."
There's a woman looked intelligent.
Incredible! I met a woman who looks intelligent.
She was over 50 years old, and she was dressed in black robes. And she said, "Quote: You are very discouraged by things that have been happening to you lately, Mr. Warren. Do not feel discouraged any longer. The work you are doing has a purpose.
Okay.
Things are going to change for you very soon." Sooner than you think.
So this was a psychic Japanese nun who just happened to be high without a name, but but who was intelligent.
And then,
I love that he made a point of saying that she was intelligent because she told him that he should continue doing what he wanted. He had to point that out, that like clearly she was an intelligent woman because she told me that I should be talking about demons.
You know, let's be fair. Ed was a misogynist.
Yeah. Let's be fair. I mean, yeah, we don't, fair.
Anyway, from that point on, they never had another problem talking about demons and Christ and religion at their things.
Yeah.
Because the nun gave them a magic book. So that we'll talk about, we should mention too. We're talking a lot about exorcism right now, but that's such a deep, complex subject. We'll have another episode for that.
Yes.
Where we talk about that.
It is a fascinating ritual. It's really interesting. I mean, the problem with it, like you said, is that it requires an entire episode dedicated to the nuance, like the nuts and bolts of everything.
We're only talking Catholic exorcism. Just about every major belief system in the world has some kind of an exorcism that you can perform. So we'll have an in-depth episode. Connor's actually doing some research on an exorcism episode right now.
Okay.
So what kind of things were they talking about their lectures, you might ask?
Yeah.
Well,
I would love to know.
Let's go through some of the books.
Let's talk
about some of their material.
Let's unpack it.
We have a few books here that are all Warren related. We've been talking a lot about the Demonologist. That includes a lot of their like early stuff. We also have this other book here. This is the book Ghost Hunters. This is one of my favorite books when I was a kid.
That's kind of a classic and iconic one.
We also have Deliver Us from Evil.
Deliver Us from Evil, is that an Ed Warren painting on the front of this?
Yep. Ed Warren painting. Great photos of them in this one too.
Yeah. I mean, look, Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren never took a bad photo. That was the thing about them. They were all...
No, they were great at publicity, man.
They knew exactly what they were doing, and they always knew that having photographic evidence of it is part of making sure that you're branding yourself properly. So they definitely did.
This book, Deliver Us from Evil, this is one of their earlier books. This one was from 1973, written by a guy named J.F. Sawyer from their case files. It has like one of my favorite titles for a chapter, which is just Satan's Daughter.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
Sick.
That would be an awesome band name.
Satan's Daughter, To Dwell with a Devil, chapter 7. There's a voodoo doll.
Oh,
we got a voodoo doll.
Of course there is.
Chapter 5, Demon in the House.
In the house. Demon in the house.
His house. Now they've got some really interesting peeks into how they view this stuff that I think goes unnoticed quite a bit when you're talking about Ed and Lorraine. Again, we're trying to have a little bit of nuance about who these people were and how they operated and how they thought. And the Demonologist provides some great quotes. They believe, they talk about how activity is especially prevalent at night and it's the psychic hours of the night, which they refer to as 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. with a peak between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. They think that the very first bits of activity usually occur around 3 a.m. How often have we heard that?
Yeah, I mean...
I think that is an Ed and Lorraine thing that you hear all the time.
I think probably. But, like the devil's hour, all that kind of
But here's the thing. If you start to look into like neurology and things like that, there are certain states that your brain is in at around 3 a.m, which would make you feel like you're seeing things quite often. It's when you wake up from these particular states, sometimes your body doesn't work. Sometimes you have sleep paralysis. Yeah. So it's very easy when you are waking up out of a deep sleep for your body to not fully wake up. Yeah. And that tends to happen around those hours. 3 a.m. is a very popular one. But, I think they believe that it's like a mockery of the Trinity or something like that. Ed says, as a rule, ghosts will do things to the house, but demonic spirits do things to people.
Okay.
One tries to scare you out of the house. The other tries to scare you out of your mind.
Okay.
He also believes, and this is one of my favorite things that they talk about in here, he believes that if money goes missing in your house, it goes to a place you might not expect. Are you ready? I think it's unlikely that such lost money just disappears into thin air.
Yeah.
Instead, between you, me, and the lamppost, I'd say there's roughly 100% chance that the money gets teleported to a sorcerer or someone else involved in the black arts. So a satanic cult.
I also love that
There's a satanic cult stealing your money with magic.
I also love that he makes a point literally of saying there's a 100% chance. So he's saying 100% of the time that you misplace money, it's going into the pockets of a sorcerer. What the is a sorcerer?
Oh, satanic.
All right.
The satanic witch.
All right. Well,
so somewhere out there, when you lose a $10 bill in your home,
just picture
it ends up in the pocket of some kind of dark wizard somewhere.
Picture a dark wizard, spending your $10 at Starbucks and get mad.
There's a couple cool quotes in here, though. One of them's from Lorraine, and I think she gets pretty close to the truth.
All right.
Here.
Oh, God.
Seances held at night very often bring on negative human or demonic spirits. How many times have you heard about seance tables lifting up and moving across the room? Ghosts don't have the power to lift tables, even if they wanted to. Only two things could do that. Either an inhuman spirit or, more likely, the psychic energy generated by people sitting around a table.
Dang. So here we go. Lorraine is saying that there's a very good likelihood that in the cases of table tipping, is that what she's really talking about, is table tipping?
Yeah.
That she believed that it was more than likely the psychic energy being built up by the group that were utilizing, that were using it.
That seems very fair to
reasonable.
me.
That's
and
a really reasonable,
and
fair.
As people who've experienced this type of thing, you know, you research the Philip experiment and you'll find that, I mean, we joke about it in the tour. Did they conjure a spirit out of their minds or did they haunt a table?
Yeah.
Because the table is where they experienced everything.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So we see, and the other funny thing, to be fair, is I think that because Ed and Lorraine obviously say insane, batshit, crazy stuff half the time.
Yeah.
When they do say something that's like, you're like, wait a second, I can kind of get behind that. I think a lot of that stuff gets lost over the more sensational things that you'll hear about Ed and Lorraine's opinions about what ghosts and demons really were.
Yeah.
So here, I think the interesting thing about that is we have Lorraine kind of coming to a pretty logical conclusion that doesn't have anything to do with Satan, which is incredible.
Yeah. Book number 2. Let's talk about book number 2. This is Graveyard. And this book was written by a guy named Ed Gorman. He didn't use his real name to write this book.
Yeah.
He was like a Western author. He wrote a lot of Westerns and
he was
horror
another
books.
fiction writer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And he was contracted to ghostwrite this book for them. Well, he didn't ghostwrite it. He wrote it under his name from their files. But he used a pen name. Wonder why. There's a very funny story in this, though.
Yeah.
Keelin wanted us specifically to mention this because Keelin just read this book. There's a guy who drives past Union Cemetery. Union Cemetery is pretty much the bulk of this book. It was like their local hometown haunt.
Yeah.
They experienced a lot of stuff there. This guy drives past Union Cemetery. Suddenly, there's a ghost man sitting in his passenger seat.
This is the best story.
Turns to him and says, I used to get scared when I drove this road at night too. Someday you'll be like I am now, and then nothing will scare you. And this dude was like, what the f?
So
he slams on the brakes.
This guy was driving down the street and
past the cemetery.
And as he's passing the cemetery, a ghost manifests next to him in the passenger seat of his car and says, you don't have to be scared.
Said, I used to be scared when I was alive.
Yeah.
And then the guy slams on his brakes, gets out of the car. The ghost is like yelling at this guy saying, get back in the car, get back in the car.
Yeah.
And this dude just turns around and starts running. And then he realizes he can hear his car behind him and he turns around and the ghost is driving his car, driving up to him.
I love it.
And then the ghost says, you might not believe this, but someday you'll be just like me. And then he disappears.
Oh.
It's like one of the goofiest ghost stories I've ever heard.
It's so weird.
The most famous thing from this book is Ed, and I remember this when I was a kid. Ed tells a story about how he captured video footage of the White Lady of Union Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And this footage was legendary. Like, he only showed it during lectures when they would give these presentations.
So the only time that you could see it was when they were traveling around, and you could go and take one of their lectures and see a sort of like behind the scenes footage and all that kind of stuff. And
I remember, like, you know, it was legendary. Like, people who had gone to the lectures would always talk about how insane it was. Like, it's the best footage of all time, but it was the hardest thing to ever get to see. And I remember when I saw it, I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. But we'll come back to that because, I mean, that's worth a little bit more investigation. But that was like the big deal from Union Cemetery. There are some interesting quotes from this book too, that again, you're like, whoa, man, they're almost there.
Yeah.
They're so close.
Yeah, there are. It's funny because there are so many instances where they get like halfway to a really interesting idea, and then immediately it's like, but it's probably just a demon. And you're like, dudes, you were so close. Why?
One of the quotes is, this is from page 59. Why do ghosts glow?
Yeah, they glow.
It's an interesting thing. Well, when you hear people talk about ghosts or you see them depicted in film,
I guess there is
they
sort of a
often have like an
luminous
aura
quality
around them. They're kind of luminous. Well, he has a theory. Lorraine and I are often asked that question. We believe that ghosts draw electromagnetic energy from the plant life, trees and bushes.
Interesting.
And on this, and that this energy is one of the reasons they often project a brilliant light.
That is a really weird and interesting theory.
I think it is. You know, we're big proponents of ghosts being electromagnetic fluctuations, or that fluctuations in the electromagnetic field allow us to see them.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe that they take that energy, but it's interesting that they're mixing that in there so early, because you don't really hear a lot of that.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
They were clearly reading some books about that type of thing. And then they have something else that might sound familiar to people, especially if you're a ghost hunter or have been. We're also asked about ghost lights that resemble tiny white balloons. Many people report seeing these in photographs they've taken at graveyards.
Oh, yes.
The curious thing is, these lights can only be seen on film, not with the naked eye.
So fascinating.
We've seen dozens of such photographs. We feel they're a supernatural phenomenon associated with graveyards where spirit activity is constant. I mention these things because they demonstrate the processes used by the society are scientific whenever possible. Well, what they're actually talking about is
orbs.
They're
basically describing orbs, but it must have been before the term was officially sort of used in the paranormal community.
You know why? Orbs did not become a very huge deal in the paranormal community until the advent of digital cameras.
Yes.
Digital cameras, when it was easy to just like snap as many as you wanted and then you could dump the card.
Yeah.
More people started to see orbs in their photographs. They still showed up in film cameras.
Yeah.
Not quite as much, but we know this now these days. Well, it's droplets of moisture being reflected by your flash.
Especially if you're, like they describe seeing them in photos at graveyards. I mean, when my friends and I first started investigating the paranormal, like in 2000, a lot of the places that we investigated were just cemeteries because it was the easiest place that you can go and investigate.
Of course.
Some of those cemeteries had like cool legends, but we would always get photos of orbs when we were in cemeteries.
Yep.
And like you said, it's droplets of moisture, bugs.
A lot of the time they're lens flares. Those are
artifacts.
People usually are saying that those are UFOs, but it's we can very, very confidently say it's people who used to believe in orbs.
Yeah. I mean, I think
they're just lens artifacts.
Yeah. And like you said, with the digital camera becoming a thing that everyone had, and the digital camera became the camera that was used for many paranormal investigators in the early 2000s. I think that because of that, most people started to realize, wait a second, we need to be a little bit more logical about what we're doing here. Because we do have the option to take as many photos as we want. And would you look at that? All of them outside in the rain have these orbs in them.
Yeah, or even if there's misty.
If you're in a basement that's dusty, it's crazy how many orbs are down here. But yeah, you're right.
But it's cool to see them talk about that.
It's very cool.
Before it was like a bigger deal.
So we know that at this point, the paranormal investigators of this time are looking at orbs as actual evidence, but they don't have that term for it.
No.
So it's so cool to see that like even Ed and Lorraine were talking about them back in the day.
One last quote. This one's one of my favorites. Ouija boards are just as dangerous as drugs. They're not meant to be played with.
All right.
literally
Wrong.
made by a toy company.
Wrong.
So they are meant to be played with.
Yeah.
And I would highly suggest doing it.
But it's not a Ouija board again. Look what we just talked about it.
Of course.
What did Captain Howdy do to Ouija boards?
Yeah.
That was it.
Made him evil.
It was over. The Exorcist, it took out Ouija boards, and it took us into a new state of being afraid of being possessed by the demon.
So here's I want to give you a very fun little detail here about this book, Graveyard.
Yeah.
There's official versions of this book that have been around a long time. We've got a couple different copies of them, but we have an anomaly. And these things are very rare, but I've come across a few. We've got a couple versions of these. This book here, this blue pamphlet is ostensibly the book Graveyard. But this one says it's by Ed and Lorraine Warren. It does not say the name of the guy who co-wrote it. In the inside, it says Special Collector's Edition, right? It's got a stapled spine. It's very low. It's like clearly low budget.
Yeah.
Like it was made at home.
This looks like, it looks like something that was probably, they self-published it and put it together. And it's, just like a little pamphlet that you could buy and hand out.
So this is why this is a little sketchy to me. And I don't know the truth about this, but I think we can extrapolate based on some of the quirks from this pamphlet. The things about this pamphlet are the page numbers are all off. They're all messed up. The page numbers are not right. And there's a lot of things that are missing from this. It's missing an introduction by the guy who actually wrote the book. Robert David Chase was his name. That's not in there. There's some extra photos and stuff in there. I think there's some newspaper articles that are in the back that aren't in the book. Stuff that is like directly copied from other things. There's like, extra photos. I think, and this is just my opinion based on the weird quirks about this, I think Ed and Lorraine were probably making their own copies of this book to sell at their lectures.
Sure.
So they didn't have to give the other guy a cut or buy the actual official books from the publisher.
So they self-printed them.
I think they self-printed these
and basically
to scam a couple extra bucks out of the arrangement.
Yeah, and they didn't have, that way they didn't have to actually lug around a bunch of books. First of all, they didn't have to buy a bunch of books.
Yes.
But still have something that people could buy.
Yes.
That's hilarious.
It's kind of weird. I mean, I think, the implications are strange.
Yeah.
With that, I don't know. You don't see these very often.
It's a weird thing to see people basically plagiarize their own work, because that's kind of what it is, right? Like
the other thing that leads me to believe this is I've never seen a copy of this pamphlet that isn't signed by them.
Oh, so you think that they were definitely being handed? They were.
I think they were
buying them at lectures?
They were hand printing these.
Yeah.
They weren't telling the publisher. They weren't telling the author. So that they could sell them and keep
without
all
having
of the money without having to give anybody a cut.
I mean, it was probably the case. It was probably a time period too, where it would have been a time period very likely that the publisher would have no idea that was going on, because it's not like Facebook was around or TikTok was around and people weren't posting photos of themselves at the event and you know what I mean?
Right.
It was probably something they got away with.
You know how I said that there's different versions of this pamphlet?
Yeah.
Well, we have another one here, and this one they've completely changed the title. So.
Okay. So it started off
Ghost or Graveyard.
Yeah.
Right? Well, this one they self-printed. Called Graveyard Ghosts by Ed and Lorraine Warren, America's top Ghostbusters.
I don't know if you noticed the back. Look what it says on the back.
Yeah, the Union.
No, it says Special Collector Edition.
Yes.
So that is really interesting.
And it's got a painting on the back of the White Lady of Union Cemetery, right? Which is what this is all about. This one's a little bit thicker, because they've actually added more stuff. They've added stuff from some of their other books. They've added stuff from the Demonologist in here too. And then there's a bunch of extra photos. There's a photo of them and Malachi Martin in the back,
I saw
which is
that,
great.
yeah.
There's something interesting about this one. You know how I said that I don't normally ever see these that aren't signed?
Yeah.
This one's signed to a very important person in the Ed and Lorraine lore.
In the canon?
In the canon.
Yeah.
They probably wish it wasn't canon.
I feel like this was a person they wish wasn't in the canon.
But this is the part of the tale where we're going to start saying allegedly a lot.
Yeah.
Because we need to. The reason I want to talk about this is because this has a very important couple inscriptions in here. These are both from Ed. There is notably not an inscription in this from Lorraine. This is to my darling Judy. I know how much you have sacrificed for me, my dear. Thank you for always being thoughtful and understanding when my work is concerned and helping in every way you could. I'll always love you. EWXXXX. This is to Judy. There's two Judys that are in the Ed and Lorraine Warren universe.
Yeah.
One is their daughter.
Yeah.
This is not that Judy.
Yeah.
The other one is someone that most people don't find out about until a particular news article comes out in 2017 because of a series of lawsuits that are being launched against the producers of the Conjuring films. This is inscribed to Judy Penny. A Hollywood Reporter article comes out in 2017 titled War Over the Conjuring, the Disturbing Claims Behind a $1 Billion Franchise. This is a quote. It appears that top studio executives were made aware just weeks after the first film opened in 2013 of allegations that, in the 1960s, Ed Warren initiated a relationship with an underage girl with Lorraine's knowledge. Now in her 70s, Judith Penny has said in a sworn declaration that she lived in the Warrens' house as Ed's lover for 4 decades.
All right.
Here's another direct quote. Ed Warren was in his mid-30s when he allegedly met 15-year-old Penny. Having not yet gained enough fame as a self-trained demonologist to pay the bills in the early 60s, Ed was working as a city bus driver in Monroe, Connecticut. Penny was a student at Central High School in the nearby town of Bridgeport who rode his bus. The two began an amorous relationship, Penny said, in a legal declaration that she gave in November of 2014. According to that document, as well as newly obtained recordings of Penny's recollection of events, by 1963, she had moved into the Warrens' home. For the next 40 years, she said she had a sexual relationship with Ed with Lorraine's knowledge. Another direct quote. In May 1978, in her 30s, Penny became pregnant with Ed's child, she said. In the declaration, she said Lorraine persuaded her to have an abortion because the birth of a child could become public and any scandal could ruin the Warrens' business. Though Lorraine claimed to be a devout Catholic, Penny said, quote, her real God is money.
Okay.
Penny also claimed, another direct quote, Penny also claimed that Ed was sometimes abusive to Lorraine. Early on, she said she witnessed him backhand his wife so hard she lost consciousness.
Oh my God.
These are all direct quotes from this like Hollywood Reporter article, which, you know, they've got shitloads of lawyers involved. Like they had to be very, very confident in their reporting to put this out.
You can't make allegations that insane. And
they do call them allegations. We should be clear.
Yeah. But the thing is, for someone to make an allegation that damning, you don't do that lightly.
No.
You don't do that lightly at all.
There is, and you know, just to be fair, playing both sides here, this is in the Hollywood Reporter article. Lorraine's attorney tells the Hollywood Reporter that Judy and Tony Spera, the Warrens' daughter and son-in-law, never saw any of the alleged conduct during the decades they spent with Ed, Lorraine, and Penny. So they don't deny that Penny was there.
Yeah.
The Warrens opened their home to Miss Penny when she was 18 and had nowhere else to live following a childhood of neglect, writes Barkin in an email. During much of their career, Ed and Lorraine were on the road working on cases, giving lectures, and Miss Penny lived at and watched their house.
Okay.
So that's their refutation of those allegations, which are pretty serious allegations, particularly for people who are presenting themselves as like devout Catholics.
Yes.
Penny does have a response. As for Penny, now in her 70s, it seems she has never received a cent from the Conjuring movies. As I'm older now, I can't even fathom why Lorraine let me stay there, she said in an October recording.
Poor Penny.
Lots of times I think about, why did I do this? Why did I screw up my life like this? Sometimes I get angry thinking about it, about how so much was taken away from me.
Yeah. I mean, so this is important to talk about because it gives us character. It gives us a interesting kind of take on their character.
Here's the thing. We can argue up and down about whether, flogging the Bible and yelling about demons and satanic cults anywhere is actually hurting anybody.
Sure.
I might
depends
think it
on
does.
Who you talk to.
But it depends on what your own personal beliefs are.
If you say that to a devout Christian, they're probably going to say that, well, there's nothing wrong with saying stuff like that.
For sure.
Yeah.
But this is a whole other can of worms.
That's completely different. Yes.
If those allegations are true, that's pretty nasty work.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, we'll just say those are just allegations.
Allegedly.
But it does make these inscriptions
very weird,
very strange. Because I've actually bought a few things off of Judy Penny. And this is one of the books that I bought from her.
Yeah.
And it is very, I don't know, man. I know how much you have sacrificed for me, my dear.
Yeah.
Thank you for always being thoughtful and understanding when my work is concerned. The XXXX, you don't really, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
That puts a real bad feeling in the pit of my stomach.
Yeah, I mean, because it's one, and it's not like the other side of it, like, us talking about people yelling about demons and being possessed is a good thing, but it's another thing when, like, you're really just sort of starting to get a big general ick vibe from the entire operation in general.
Yeah. Everything's
starting to feel really, really, really gross.
It's such a stark contrast to the way that the movies portray them.
Yeah.
And we'll come back to something really weird that's in the contract of those films that kind of like might make you think a little bit deeper about some of these allegations. But in the movies, partially due to the fact that Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga have incredible chemistry on screen.
Yeah, they're lovely.
They're depicted as this like super loving couple, one of the greatest romances in a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a great depiction of like two people in love. Like that's the thing. They're so believable as people in love in the movies. Like you could just feel it. Like you feel it coming off of them. And I think that the films have really shaped the way that the people think about them presently.
Yeah. Anyway,
we had to talk about that. It would be completely unfair if we hadn't brought that up. For sure.
Well, anyway, you can go read it yourself.
Yeah, make up your own mind about it.
We'll warn you ahead of time. It's kind of gnarly.
Yeah.
We read some of the gnarlier quotes in there, but it will probably, color your perception of these folks if you enjoy the films. It's kind of tough for me to watch the movies now.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked the movies. We get a lot of stuff in the mail. 9 times out of 10, we don't experience anything. But that last 10% is where things get really interesting. And occasionally, there's 1% that changes the way that we think about haunted objects.
We bind it to the nails,
and we release it.
The Unbinding, now available on Blu-ray. Exclusively at planetweird.store.
I think there's a dark streak that runs through the Warrens' work in their lives. We can look at a couple other cases that they've worked on. Very famous one was the Amityville Horror.
Yeah.
They were really only there for a night.
Yeah.
They did a seance. 2 nights total. Ed and Lorraine were there for 2 nights total.
It was the Enfield Poltergeist. I believe they were only there for like a few hours.
That was it. The Conjuring 2 is all based on the Enfield Poltergeist case, but the truth of the matter is they weren't really there.
No.
They literally just showed up. They had a habit of doing this. They would just show up and insert themselves into that story.
Yes.
And
they were pushy and they knew that if they could get in the door, then there was a very good likelihood that they could kind of control the narrative of what was going on.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be the angle most of the time.
So if if you watch The Conjuring 2, you have this opinion that, that Ed and Lorraine were there this whole time.
Yeah.
It wasn't them. It was a couple other guys who were like actual legit parapsychologists.
Yeah, there were other people that
Guy Lyon Playfair.
Yep.
If you want something to watch that'll give you a much better idea, there's a fantastic series on Apple TV that's just the Enfield Poltergeist, where they use like actual recordings that the real actual parapsychologists took while they were there.
Yeah.
And then they do recreations using the audio of these interviews.
Very, very cool.
So the actors are actually mouthing the words.
That's
and everything.
really cool.
It's pretty sick. It's a great doc. It'll give you a better idea of what the Enfield Poltergeist thing actually was. Then there's The Conjuring 3. The Devil Made Me Do It. That is one of the more recent ones. In the 1980s.
Yeah.
The Warrens were called to the home of David Glatzel by his mother,
Yeah.
claiming that her son was possessed by a demon.
Yes. And these
There's-
people are all like David Glatzel's still alive.
Oh yeah, he's still around. There's an artifact in the Warrens Museum that is my favorite artifact in their museum. We'll throw a photo of this thing on screen. They keep it in a box that says like, you know, remember that the devil is real on it. And it looks like the T-Rex from Toy Story.
It does look like the T-Rex from Toy Story. I think about that every time I see it.
It's probably what it's modeled after.
It probably is.
The Toy Story toy is modeled after, probably. And it's literally a toy T-Rex that they claimed they saw floating on its own. And then it looked at the family and said, "You're all going to die."
You're all going to die.
And now it is in a case in the museum. Goes to the spaghetti dinners.
Yeah. Oh, you could
So
see
you
it.
can go see it. The photo is funny. It's one of the funniest things I've ever
I
seen.
want to see it so bad.
No. It says, "Accept the existence of the devil."
Whoa. Oh my God. What, they had to bend it all weird to get it in there.
It's just this T-Rex toy. Accept the existence of the devil. Anyway, what happens in this case is they give their kid, David, who they believe was possessed by the devil. This is, in the 80s. They give him an exorcism. They bring a priest to give this kid an exorcism.
Yeah, so this is a story that where it's really, really, really starting to get hard to have any kind of a good opinion about these people because they really did a number on this family.
Yeah. Well, there was another guy who was present at the exorcism. His name was Arnie Johnson.
Yeah, and this was a little boy that they were exorcising. He was
There's a little
12
kid.
years old.
Oh, yeah.
A little 12-year-old kid in the 80s.
Oh, yeah. There's a documentary on Netflix.
It's great. It's a great documentary.
I would highly, highly recommend it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend The Conjuring 3, but
No.
this documentary on Netflix is fantastic. It's called The Devil on Trial.
Yeah.
And it is about what actually happened.
Yeah, many of the original family members are in it, and they just kind of talk you through the whole thing.
You can hear the original like recordings that they did during the exorcism, and it sounds like a little kid.
Yeah,
like it even. Here's the thing: when you watch The Exorcist, you see a little kid saying like, "Your mother sucks cocks in hell."
Yeah.
You're like, "Oh, a little kid wouldn't say that," but like David possessed is saying like, "You're a douchebag, mom."
He calls his mom a douchebag. Like demons are gonna call people douchebags.
Didn't sound.
It's like a very like
sound
classic.
Like a kid LARPing.
It sounded like it sounds like a scene from Goonies is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Like you're a douchebag, mom.
Yes.
Like it's literally a little kid.
During this exorcism, you can hear audio of these things going on. During this exorcism, they bring this priest in. They give this kid an exorcism. This other guy who's there, Arnie Johnson, he yells, "Hey, why don't you just do it to me?
Yeah.
Take me instead of this kid."
Yeah, and so during the kind of tumultuous moment of this layperson exorcism that is going on, or was it an actual? Did they claim that it was an actual?
I mean, they claim it was an actual exorcism.
So this exorcism that's going on,
I think it was like an Orthodox. Basically, it wasn't like a traditional Catholic church because there's no record of this.
Yes, and so they've got audio going, and you can hear what is basically a group of people talking to a little boy, and he's giggling and he's kind of doing a growly voice, and he's kind of he's swearing and he's saying a bunch of crazy stuff, and you hear him say like, basically you can take me.
Oh yeah, take me instead, and like
suddenly
Ed and Lorraine and everybody are
horrified.
Like, what did you do? You can't do that. You can't do that.
Apparently
everything was fine.
Yeah, but apparently they didn't tell the family the number one rule of exorcisms, which is never say, you can jump into me during the exorcism. So rule number one,
how would you know? Maybe it was a first for them too.
Wouldn't you have primed the people beforehand?
You would think if this was that serious.
Oh.
Well, something spooky does happen because a year after that exorcism took place, and that kid, David, he was fine after that.
Yeah,
it seemed like
he said he was fine.
He said he was fine. But a year after that happened, Arnie Johnson stabbed a man to death in an argument.
Yeah.
And claimed that he did not remember doing it.
Yeah, he had a fugue state, apparently.
And so he literally claimed, his defense claimed, it was a big deal. His defense claimed the devil actually possessed him and made him do this.
Yeah, they tried to bring it to trial, and in that, like, the argument would be that he was possessed by the devil when he stabbed this man 4 times.
Yes.
The details that were left out is that the 2 men were drinking all day, and they got into an argument. There were witnesses that were there. There was a lot of things that were there.
There were rumors that they were arguing over a woman.
Yeah.
There was some kind of like love triangle happening. It was a very messy thing, but the judge was like, I'm not going to hear this shit.
He threw it out immediately and was like, no, we're not, this is not happening. We're going to do this based on the crimes that have been committed and not you saying that you're possessed by the devil.
Arnie Johnson is out now.
Yeah. I've
actually seen that he has been going to like paranormal conferences. So you might be able to meet this guy if you go to conferences.
Okay.
He's out now. He claims that he's not possessed, even though he has never had an exorcism.
Yeah.
He's not possessed. He says in that documentary, The Devil on Trial, I know what to do.
He says that he had no memory of the incident happening. He was walking down the stairs and he was leaving the scene where the argument was happening. And then the next memory that he has is someone telling him that he just killed a man. So he claims that he has no memory of the actual incident itself.
So you'll get one version of this story by watching The Devil Made Me Do It, the Conjuring 3. But I would highly, highly suggest watching the 2023 documentary on Netflix, The Devil on Trial, because, and this is a spoiler, we are talking about the facts of these cases. This is a spoiler, but they do a really amazing job. It's a great documentary. It is a really good documentary. The filmmakers just crushed it on this. It's shot beautifully. But the first half of the movie is basically telling the version that everyone knows about the story. Yeah, it even plays a bit like a classic, like, paranormal documentary. It's got like the stings and like you sort of
spooky. Yeah, exactly.
It's very spooky.
And so it tells the story of the family and their experiences up to a point.
Yeah.
And then
about, halfway through, you meet somebody that you haven't met yet in the story. And it is David's older brother, old enough that he saw a different version of all of this. He's like, I remember during one of these outbursts while Ed and Lorraine were around, they were interviewing all of us about what was going on. And he says, first off, why didn't you tell the kids to go into another room? You're putting ideas in their heads.
Yeah, there was a point where he mentions that there was a big meeting where everyone had to kind of come together, and then Ed and Lorraine proceeded to tell them what was going to happen to them, which is like he's going to start growling, he's going to start swearing. And they were saying this in front of a 12-year-old kid.
And he did.
Who's sitting there going like, I'm going to start doing this shit.
Great idea.
Yeah, I get to swear and no one's going to stop me. I'm going to be able to spit and kick stuff and go crazy and like basically have an outburst. And they're sitting there kind of priming this kid and saying like, these are things that could happen. Yeah. And the brother was smart enough in the moment to recognize like, why wouldn't you have separated so that we could keep a little bit of, I don't know, authenticity here. It was an interesting detail I thought was fascinating.
I mean, the detail that stuck with me was the older brother saying, he's swearing at my mom. He's like screaming and growling and everything. And he said, but the weird thing was, my dad came over and said, if you don't knock that off, you're going to get beat. And then all of a sudden, he stopped.
He was like, well, the devil listened to my dad. So
devil listened to my dad.
Yeah, he wasn't listening to Ed and Lorraine. He wasn't listening to his mom, but immediately listened to his dad when his dad got mad. Because his father, according to the documentary, was really he didn't believe what was going on. He was getting progressively more irritated and upset about the fact that this was kind of continuing to happen in this house.
Yeah. He kind of, towards the end of the documentary wraps it up by saying, one of the things that we found when we were going through, he said his mom had OCD and she saved everything. And they found her journals from when all of this was happening, when this case was happening. And in it, she regularly mentions that everyone had their medicine.
All the family had
their medicine.
Yeah.
And he realized that and things would calm down after the family had their medicine. And he said he noticed that, he always knew that like mom's food was always separate from everybody else's food.
Yeah, yeah.
And he realized that his mom was dosing them with like a certain sleeping medication.
Yeah, that he thought that's what was going on.
And one of the side effects is mood swings and hallucinations.
And weight gain.
This kid, David, he's in the documentary. And I mean, to be fair, he still believes that he was possessed by the devil. He believes that, all this happened. but he says something very, very sad at the end. And this is from a guy who believes in everything that happened to him. This kid, grown up now, he has a quote at the end of the doc where he says, Lorraine told me I was going to be a rich little boy from having this book deal.
Yeah.
And that was a lie.
Yeah.
The Warrens made a lot of money off of us.
Yeah.
If they can profit off of you, they will.
Yeah.
They claim in the documentary that Ed and Lorraine made almost $100,000 off of this. And this was like a long
80s, 1980, early 1980s.
I think it equates $300,000 or something in today's money.
Yeah.
And they gave less than $5,000 off of the book to this
the
family.
actual family that this happened to.
Yeah. You can even hear conversations, a recorded conversation with the mom calling Lorraine and saying, "Hey, where's our money? We need this money too."
What's going on with the book?
That's horrible.
It's really, the hard part about it is with this case specifically, we watched this documentary and I really started thinking about what was going on here. And because the thing is, I'm trying to be fair to the families. I could give a shit about Ed and Lorraine at this point, but I really am trying to be fair to these families and these people who are going through these experiences, because I don't believe that all of these people were lying or exagerating. I think these were people who were having strange experiences.
They believed what was happening to them.
Yes. And I think this is an interesting case because I think this case specifically starts to paint a picture, and it's potentially as a magic practitioner or as someone who are occultists, people who are occultists, we start to see something here starting to form. And it is that it seems as if these types of situations are attempts at initiatory experiences.
Yes.
There's an attempt here to create communitas. There's an attempt here to create a beginning, middle, and end, an initiatory experience for a family who's very distraught, very upset, going through something. You have a young boy who's clearly lashing out. He's going through puberty. A family that's really, really struggling emotionally. They're not in a great place. They're looking for help outside. And you have this really unique opportunity for these people to come in, to validate their fears, to help them, to make them feel better, and to have potentially this really powerful initiatory experience to facilitate for these people. And this seems to be kind of a common thing that happens. Ed and Lorraine come in, they post up inside the house for a period of time. It would be a perfect scenario to create a space for that liminal experience to happen, but it doesn't. And what happens is a group of people basically go through an intensely traumatic experience together, and they do not have people that are there with them to help them traverse those spaces. They do not have the right kind of people to help them go through those initiatory experiences so that they can come out the other end of it with that initiation feeling completed within their psyche. They don't have that.
No, they don't. In fact, this is a conversation that you and I have quite often about what we think is one of the biggest problems with the general paranormal world.
Yeah.
Is that back in the day, we used to have holy people, shaman, people who could lead you through these experiences
facilitators,
safely.
practitioners, people who were trained and prepared to help people go through those processes.
And they could tailor those processes directly to you and what you were experiencing.
Yes.
And, we talk about it in Hellier, the idea of an initiatory experience requiring a sense of communitas.
Yes. I mean, look, the whole family, we're in this together, you guys. We got to do this together.
And that you need a very well hermetically sealed encapsulation of this experience,
which you
with
have.
Someone who's guarding the door.
You do not have
and
that.
walking you through it. And what we have seen now is these days, largely because of people like Ed and Lorraine and the influence that they had on the general paranormal experience, you have people who are having these spontaneous initiatory experiences, and then instead of getting like a beautiful gift out of it, you have someone who comes in who's a piece of shit,
or
a grifter, a liar, who is
or worse, people who are just jumping into an experience so they could get a story out of it, so they could get an experience out of it. And the family itself was not gently cared for and helped through this very magical process. Again, whether at the end of the day, this family was going through something that they believed was very real. It could have been a very, very, very impactful, powerful experience for them to go through this experience. Maybe things were manifesting around them. It was seemingly a perfect scenario for outward manifestation of strange paranormal things. You have the perfect scenario here. You have young people, you have a family that's really going through something. And it's really, really, really frustrating to see over and over and over again, people, especially with the Warrens, go through these experiences and have these failed initiations.
And the problem is, a failed initiation will leave you destroyed.
I mean, you're traumatized.
You're traumatized.
You have to go through
because instead of actually fixing this issue yourself, that with help facilitated by somebody who can guide you through that experience, you've had your agency taken away from you in that experience. You've had somebody else who had to come in and fix that problem instead of guiding you down the path. You've been traumatized by somebody who's telling you what you're experiencing instead of asking you what you're experiencing and seeing where that's going. And I think the effect that they have had, Ed and Lorraine, on the general understanding of the paranormal has been a total destructive effect because it has resulted in people replacing their shaman with entertainers.
Yes. And
whether it's a television psychic, whether it's like a medium who's there to write a book, whether it's a ghost hunter who's there to like cleanse your house for you or like get you on TV. You have replaced a really, really important part of that initiatory experience with someone who's there to make a buck.
Yeah, it sucks. It's very frustrating. It's a very frustrating thing to see time and time again, specifically when all of the all the pieces are there, all of the ingredients are there. And I refuse to believe that these people who have had these experiences, specifically with the Warrens, but I mean, it's happened with other investigators, specifically from that time period. I refuse to believe these people weren't having strange experiences, that their paranormal encounters weren't actually something that was happening around them, that they really were looking for help from people, and what they were finding were entertainers, and they weren't really finding people. They were finding people who were looking for their next book to write. They were finding people who were looking for ways, maybe not intentionally to exploit them, but that the problem is this: when you take on a case, especially when you take on a case that's residential, when you're dealing with people's lives, when you're dealing with people's actual lives, you have to see it through to the end.
Oh, dude, yeah.
You have to see. You are responsible.
It's why we don't do home investigations.
No,
we used to do that stuff, but like, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist.
Yeah.
I'm not a shaman. I'm not going to be able to guide you through that experience.
One of the worst things that you could do if a magical process is happening, specifically in this instance, is a good example, I think, when the magical process is happening, is to pick up and leave, to create more chaos in the space, to not help facilitate people through these different waves. Because the thing is, there's cycles as you go through them. Emotions come and go. It's a process. It's a process of moving through something. And when you don't have someone there who can help you, who knows how to help you through an experience like that, when they're not equipped, they don't have the ability to guide you through that, then all that you have are people who are meddling and making things worse. Yeah. And sometimes making things worse means more exciting books, and I'm not saying that they were doing that intentionally, but it seems to be that at the end of this documentary, this poor man is saying, like, if they can exploit you, they will. Yeah. So this guy has these memories 40 something years later
that have clearly, like, you watch the documentary and like it's clearly had a very bad effect on him.
Yeah.
It's really up. I see the ripples of that in all
everywhere,
all of the paranormal today. I see so many people who are being taken advantage of at worst, or having their experiences misinterpreted at best.
Yeah, and often their experiences are misinterpreted by somebody who's already made up their mind about what they're selling or what the pitch is or what it is, and it's something that I think you and I we struggle to talk about this subject matter because it's deeply frustrating, and it's something that I think at first glance can appear very, very kind of silly, almost like, oh, they're just ghost hunter
people.
Not
hurting anybody.
Yeah, they're just having fun. They think ghosts are real. But the difference between Ed and Lorraine is they were coming into people's homes and they were throwing around words like possessed. that you were possessed by a demon. They were telling people they were evil. They were telling people there was evil inside of them.
They were using religion as a way to dictate the story for somebody else.
Yeah, and those stories then became popularized and essentially disseminated the information out into the world, and then people picked up on those things and started doing them themselves. So you have the influence of that disseminating out into into the world, and other paranormal investigators are sort of picking up on the same techniques, and they're not helpful. They're not helpful.
Yeah.
So what else do we have here?
We should give Keelin a call.
All right.
Do you think a modern cell phone works?
Maybe. Try.
I don't know. Let's see. Let's see what happens. We'll see if Keelin
is here with us in the Warren universe.
Yeah. Somebody else has to be here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Maybe Keelin's around.
Hello.
Holy shit, Keelin!
Hey.
Where are you?
Well, I was, as you know, I think. I was looking for Nessie.
We heard. We knew. We knew you were really busy.
Yeah.
I can't believe my cell phone even works. I feel like we're dressed weird. We're in another place. Where are you? Are you still in Loch Ness?
No, I think something also happened to me, because I was out looking for Nessie, and then this like staticky fog or something came through and pulled me in, and now I got dropped. Well, I'm in Southington, Connecticut. Do you guys know about the house from the Haunting of Connecticut?
Oh no! Now you're part of this.
What's going on?
I think we've been sucked into the Ed and Lorraine Warren universe.
I think Keelin might have to tell us about this history.
Yeah, you're from Connecticut. What's the deal with this house?
Yeah, I am. And that really, the Ed and Lorraine version of Connecticut, I feel like it's just like regular Connecticut. There's just satanic cults everywhere. So that really sucks.
We were just talking about
how they apparently go to New England to retire.
Yeah, all the Connecticut.
You guys have so many satanic
Connecticut
cults.
Is Florida for satanic cults.
Yes.
Oh
no. What's the deal with this case? What's the deal with this house?
Okay, all right. So this house is in Southington, Connecticut. So back in June of 1986, we have Alan and Carmen Snedeker.
Yes.
And a bunch of their kids. And Carmen's oldest son gets diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so they moved to Connecticut to be closer to the hospital that he's getting his cancer treatment for.
Yeah.
And so they find this great house. It's a 2-family house. And they start renting it. But when they move in, they find out that it used to be a funeral home.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's pretty creepy. And it was an active funeral home up until like the summer, the year before they moved in. So it was like very recent.
What started happening to them when they were there?
So they moved in, and the oldest son, Philip, who was getting the cancer treatment, he chose his bedroom down in the basement, which is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But he starts experiencing weird stuff, and soon the whole family is experiencing weird stuff. You got like the usual, scratching and rapping sounds in the walls.
Classic haunted house stuff.
Classic haunted house. And then they're hearing like the chain pulleys and the dumbwaiter moving.
Ooh.
And weird fluctuations in temperature. Some of the kids are seeing like creepy apparitions. I think somebody saw like a tall woman with like long black hair. Somebody else saw a man in a pinstripe suit. So I guess like Beetlejuice.
Nice.
They said it 3 times.
They can't be doing that.
They didn't need to call the Warrens. They could have just said it 3 more times.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did Ed and Lorraine get involved?
So Carmen, she finds out about Ed and Lorraine, through the grapevine, because there's like, creepy stuff happening. She's like telling her neighbors about it. Like, at one point she was like mopping the floor, and like the mop water just like turned into blood. And at one point, like, so her nieces ended up moving in with them too. So this was a full house. Her like quilt from her bed started levitating at one point.
Mhm.
So they're having like pretty crazy experiences. So Carmen calls the Warrens. The Warrens show up. And in classic Warrens fashion, they basically walk in and they're immediately like, it's a demon.
Of course.
And Ed claims, and I cannot find any basis of why he said this, but he claims it's a demon because when it was a funeral home, somebody committed necrophilia.
Wait,
What the
you just said this?
He just said this.
You think Lorraine was just sitting there watching this happen
Lorraine's like,
psychically?
oh no!
So the Warrens, they show up. They're like, there's definitely a demon in here. And they move into the house for like, some places say 7, other places say 9 weeks.
Okay.
So
Wow.
they
They
were there
live
for
there?
a
The longest
while.
house guest.
Yeah,
Can you imagine?
I can't.
I don't even like my friends being around for 9
That is
weeks.
crazy. All
Oh
right.
my goodness.
And they also brought their grandson and their nephew, John Zaffis. So he was also there
Oh, that's
investigating
right.
all of this.
Mhm.
Well, I know that in the movie that they made about it, they don't even have Ed and Lorraine aren't even in it.
I started watching the movie like a couple of years ago, and I got so bored like halfway through, I shut it off. So
It's not the
I don't
Fair
think I
enough.
got
Not the
to that
best.
point. So they investigate the home, and their plan is basically they're trying to gather as much evidence of demonic activity to show to the church to try and convince them to get somebody to come to the house to do an exorcism.
Yes.
Yes.
And allegedly they do, and the exorcism ends with like a bolt of lightning and the tree in front of the house like falling apart.
Oh, hell yeah.
And there is some controversy on whether or not this exorcism actually happened.
Wait, you're kidding me. I've
Controversy?
never heard such a thing around Ed and Lorraine.
So they say, you know, they sent all this stuff to the church and they sent an exorcist and they did whatever. But when the church was asked, like the Catholic Archdiocese in Hartford said there was no officially sanctioned exorcism at this house.
Oh, no kidding.
Mhm.
So, you know, either it just didn't happen or maybe somebody went rogue.
Oh, they
Went
did
to
one
the house.
themselves.
Yeah, that's wow.
Well, we've already learned that you have to be specifically ordained by the Catholic Church in order to perform a real exorcism.
Yeah, we've learned
But
that
of course.
apparently Catholics have very, very specific rules.
Yeah, can you believe it?
Can you believe that they have
Whoa.
rules?
So where does this all end up?
So at the end of this, the Warrens, they start working with a writer to sort of, create a book around the events
Right.
of this haunting. The writer is Ray Garton, and it's immediately kind of suspect because he is not like a nonfiction writer. He's a horror novelist.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
So you immediately, yeah, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So he writes this book, In a Dark Place, The Story of a True Haunting. It comes out in 1992, just in time for Halloween.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like a big media frenzy. They're going on all these talk shows to promote it. I watched a video of this show. I'd never heard of it before. It's called the Sally Jesse Raphael Show.
Oh my God.
Keelin,
it's-
you are so young.
Keelan is very young.
There-
Sally Jesse Raphael was what you watched when you were home from school when you were
Yeah.
a kid at like 2 in the afternoon, and it was usually
Salacious.
it was
It
salacious stuff.
definitely had that vibe.
Yeah.
There's going to be so many people in the comments talking about how young you are.
I
Keelin.
know.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
so you
was
watched
watching it,
this-
I was like,
You watch this crazy old show called Sally Jesse Raphael.
I was like, this is like Jerry Springer, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly.
Did she have her big red glasses on? She always wore big red glasses. That was her whole thing.
No, but it was so I watched this episode and it's so funny because it's, you know, the parents and a handful of the kids and the whole audience is just full of their neighbors.
Oh, no
like,
kidding.
Getting up and being like, I think you're full of shit.
No way.
I love it.
That's amazing.
And so also in this show, they have like Ed and Lorraine are brought in towards the end and like a professional skeptic. And Ed just fights with him the entire time. He doesn't let him speak.
I think that they actually fictionalized, like dramatized this
I think they did.
in one of the Conjuring films.
Yeah. Yeah.
In like the intro to one of the
Yeah.
films. Yeah. So that actually happened.
It's way worse in real life.
Oh my
It's so
God.
awkward.
But after the book comes out, the author, Garton, claims that he, you know, was interviewing the family to write this book, but none of their stories lined up with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went to Ed and was like, none of their stories are making sense. What do you want me to do? What is this? And Ed basically just told him, you've got most of it. Just like use what's there and just make it scary. Just make the rest up. Yeah.
Basically that meme where like there's a stick person with a stick and just poking the dead body on the ground and just do an Amityville.
Do an Amityville.
Yes, exactly.
That's what they were trying to do.
Do an Amityville.
So the family was poised to make money from this book. Also allegedly like their stories of the house being haunted didn't really get started until they allegedly got behind on rent. So there's kind of a lot going on there. The landlady also says that like she told them that it used to be a funeral home before they moved in.
So they were primed.
And they lived there for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Supposedly being, you know, tormented by these demons.
Wow.
And they say they stayed that long because, you know, even if they left, the things followed them.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, they ended up moving out either after the exorcism and or before their landlady was able to evict them.
Oh, wow. So they
so they didn't get that money is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's anything else ever happened at that house? You ever heard any other stories about it? What's it like now?
Yeah. So even at the time, because it's a 2-family house, there was a lady living above them. She never experienced anything.
Poor lady. Oh my God.
that would
poor
suck.
lady. Oh my God.
So even at the time, the other person living in this building was like, I'm not experiencing anything. I don't think they're experiencing anything. No one has experienced anything since they have moved out. And, you know, I'm here right now. This is a very normal neighborhood. It's still a 2-family house. It's lived in. Honestly, if it went up for rent, I would try and rent it.
Yeah.
Wow.
That would be awesome.
Well, all right. Well, so what's the verdict? What do you think happened?
You know, I hesitate to say they made all of it up. I would guess maybe they experienced some things. I mean, this was also a family that had a lot of turmoil going on.
Sure.
You know, they had their oldest kid, you know, in cancer treatment. He was like, part of the story too is like his personality changed really drastically after they moved in. But I read that and I'm like, this is a 13, 14-year-old boy. Like,
going through puberty. Also
with a potentially deadly disease.
Yeah, like that would bum anybody out.
I mean, you could imagine that he probably was also on like medication, like things that would have altered his personality. It would have affected like how he was in the world. Like
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think if anything happened, it was probably more of a result of just this family just under a lot of stress.
Mhm.
Sure.
And maybe things started happening and then they potentially, took advantage of that.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Say.
Yeah.
Sure.
Interesting.
Before we let you go and try and figure out how the hell to get home,
Yeah, please do.
let me ask you, what's the vibe out that way? Are Ed and Lorraine, are they like heroes out there in Connecticut?
It's really interesting. So I would say more so yes than probably other parts of the country. Like,
Yeah.
It's interesting because I feel like they still hold this like authority over the paranormal and like ghost hunting out here.
Yeah.
Like every ghost hunting group, paranormal group I've ever seen or like read the website of, they all claim some connection to the Warrens. They
Yeah.
always
yeah.
People
like,
all, yeah.
Dude,
we were trained by the
Yes.
Warrens.
Yeah.
even running the paranormal circuit for as many years as we did, I couldn't even count how many people we've met that were
Yeah.
like, I was trained by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
Anybody who's
Yep.
from New England
Yes.
basically
Oh, yeah.
claims that they were trained by Ed and Lorraine Warren.
So there's still definitely this sense of like authority, but it's also interesting, specifically in Connecticut, because they just lived here.
Yeah.
So half the stories I hear about the Warrens are, I saw them speak, like my parents have seen them and gone to their lectures.
That's so crazy.
I mean, of
Like,
course they would. Yeah.
Yeah, like my dad, when he was in high school, they went to his high school.
Oh man.
Cannot imagine them talking at a high school.
They went to like my town's local high school in like the 80s or something, and my parents went to see them.
That's
So it's
crazy.
like, the other half of the stories are like, oh yeah, I met Lorraine at Stop and Shop.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's interesting.
I love it.
Because she's just like around.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Keelin, thank you for that.
Thank you, Keelin.
On the scene report.
Of course.
Are you okay out there? Do you need anything?
Yeah, I think I'm probably fine. I think I'll just go and try and join a satanic cult,
Good,
I guess.
yeah.
Perfect. They'll keep you safe.
Yep.
Exactly.
Go to your nearest satanic cult.
Mm-hmm.
We'll try and figure out how to get back home.
Yeah,
I feel like
we'll be back as soon as we can.
we're doing a Quantum Leap episode.
Oh, hell yeah. I love that show.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, maybe we'll see you on the other
See
side.
you on the other
All
side,
right, guys.
Keelin.
Good luck.
Thanks, Keelin.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Okay.
Well, thanks for that, Keelin.
Thank you for that, Keelin. We've got the insider. You know what's interesting about it too is here's another example of how Ed and Lorraine Warren are like local legends.
Yeah.
They're you know what I mean? Like you get that their legend remains. It is ingrained within not just the folklore of New England, but it has persisted through the people who continue to investigate the paranormal
Yes.
out all over the country. People who come from that area might have more of an influence of the style of Ed and Lorraine Warren just based on the fact that they're legitimately legendary in that area of the country.
Do you wish you could have weekly episodes of the Haunted Objects podcast? If so, you're in luck because we just launched Museum Mailbag, a companion show where we dive deep into previous episodes' topics, answer your questions about the unexplained, and reveal the secrets of the universe.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. The only way to get the show is to become a member of the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. Becoming a member doesn't just support the show, it also gives you access to monthly live-streamed adventures and experiments with us.
And a magical monthly subscription box with live classes about the occult and witchcraft with me.
Plus, you'll get downloadable goodies, exclusive merch, and more.
To join the museum and get your weekly dose of the Haunted Objects podcast and so much more, join us at patreon.com/paramuseum.
Well, that covers just about all of the Hollywood cases, the ones that have been covered in big movies.
Yeah.
And there is one more. There's only one more Conjuring film coming out.
Yeah.
We'll see what that's about. I think it might be a werewolf movie.
Is
That's
it
a
about
whole
the
other
Canadian,
story.
the French Canadian guy?
The werewolf?
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who's like just has a mental illness.
Yeah.
Probably. Let's talk real quick about one of my favorites, though. This one is very fun and silly. The Bridgeport Poltergeist back in 1974. Yeah. This one did not end up being a movie because
Shocking.
You'll see why. It would be a fun movie if it did.
It should be, yeah.
It is one of the most documented paranormal cases in Connecticut history, largely because of Ed and Lorraine Warren's involvement, but it became a media circus. There's a family, the Goodins. They called police because they were noticing that there was like a knocking that sounded like it was coming from inside the wall.
Yeah.
It's a very common thing in poltergeist cases. Yeah, so I could see like, okay, maybe this could be real.
Yeah, right? I love that. It's an interesting theory that it's just the sound is basically emanating from inside of the wood, not from an outside source.
But that wasn't it. It got crazy. They were like, I mean, there was a lot of talk about a couch that would move on its own, like a chair, a recliner that would move and open on its own. TVs would turn on and off and move around. Things would float through the room.
It's cool.
But there's one detail from this story that is the best of all the details from this. It is that there was a talking cat.
Oh!
The family had a possessed cat. I told you we were going to come back to this.
I remember you saying this. I remember the story now.
They had a possessed cat that sang jingle bells.
Why does that make it evil? If
Ed
my
and Lorraine
cat
got involved.
Well, there you go. If my cat sang jingle bells, do you know how excited I would be?
This was reported by dozens of witnesses.
I love that there's a detail too where someone like corrected them and said, actually, the cat wasn't singing jingle bells. He was just talking.
Well, listen to this. This is a quote.
I love this quote.
The family cat, Sam, a 6-month-old white and yellow alley cat that sat for minutes on this reporter's lap, purring, was capable of speaking in clearly distinguishable language that the family gave conflicting stories about. He called one of the cops a jackass. The cat was a cat.
Oh, my God.
It would be a cadge, actually. All cops are jackasses. Mr. Gooden said words presumably formed by the demon were being uttered through the medium of the cat, said Mr. Warren, who claims to have witnessed the event. So Ed Warren claimed to have witnessed a cat talking in numerous languages. It could be heard to utter words in 3 tones of voice and both sings and talks like a sailor. Jerry mentioned to his friends that the cat would kick at the basement door, yelling things such as, "Let me out, you dirty Frenchman, you dirty Greek." So it would say
Jeez, it was racist. It was a racist cat.
So like the cat would yell like racially motivated slurs.
I know this is a total lie. You know why? No cats are racist.
No cats are racist.
No cats are ever racist,
Cats are the purest animal.
They are. It's a lie.
Police report at the time of allegedly talked of the cat singing jingle bells, but, and this is important, a quote from one of the policemen. One policeman and a fireman denied that the calico cat talked or sang jingle bells. They said that Sam only appeared to talk when held by Meredith Gooden in her arms as her teeth were clenched, Edgar Bergen style.
So she was throwing her voice.
She was performing a ventriloquist act.
Yeah. And using the cat as like her puppet.
And so
Ed thought it was real.
Jingle bells, jingle all the way.
And the demon was talking to the cat.
Who knows if he even thought it was real?
That's a good point.
He probably just thought, well,
just a good story.
Demonic cat, a racist demonic cat screaming at people. The problem was once the Warrens got involved, it became such a like crazy. You could find images of this on the internet with like there's like the chief of police had to come and like put a stop to it. And eventually the chief of police like came out and said, guys, it's a hoax.
Yeah.
We know it's a hoax.
Yeah, like
go
stop,
home.
Leave, please.
It's just kids.
Just
around.
So they're just like traveling all over the country, just causing chaos in like small neighborhoods and driving the local police chiefs nuts, basically.
The police actually suggested, because, I mean, this is Connecticut. The police have probably know all about Ed and Lorraine. The police actually told the family, like, you should get these guys out of here.
Really?
Tell them to leave.
Yeah.
And so because the police suggested it, they made the Warrens leave. A quote here says, the Gooden family, at the insistence of police, asked Warren and his wife Lorraine Monday night not to return to their 4-room bungalow in the working class North End.
Yeah. I'm so mad.
All right, let's bring it down.
I can literally feel my blood pressure. It's like risen.
You know what? It could be the fact that you're wearing Lorraine's locket.
I know.
A bunch of the stuff here. Dana has Lorraine's.
We have a lot of movie props here.
Dana has Lorraine's locket from the Conjuring movies.
We have a locket.
And Lorraine's rosary.
Rosary and Lorraine's. Look at this
wedding ring from the movie.
Look at that.
And also her holy water container.
That's right here. The Vera Farmiga touched this.
Yeah.
The queen herself.
Yep. These are all from the Conjuring films. I mean, cool pieces.
Yeah, we have, I think, listen, the paranormal has obviously a place in pop culture. And so we have lots of pop culture, cool movie, paranormal related things.
All right, let's bring it back down.
Right,
We're getting a little heated.
I know. I need to just calm down for a second. I need to do a little grounding.
Perfect way to do that is with a nature spirit.
Oh, thank God. Are we going to talk about
We're going to talk about
Greg's
the time.
favorite story?
It's my favorite Ed and Lorraine story.
It's the only good one.
The time that Lorraine met Bigfoot. You might not have ever heard this before.
I love the idea that Lorraine met Bigfoot out in the woods.
This is one that I don't think they'd ever make into a film. We'll see. They got that one more to go. We'll see.
If
maybe
Bigfoot
they'll put
is in that movie, I will lose
maybe
my
that's
mind.
the cold open.
Oh my God. That would actually be cool as shit.
Lorraine Warren was with a group of students.
Yeah.
And a group of people that she referred to as hill people.
She called them hill people.
Which I
Can
think
you
is
imagine Lorraine like out in the woods with all these people, like her all done up in her
Hicks.
Yeah.
You might as well have said that.
She called them hill folk, basically.
I think she was trying to say they were poor people. She was the group of
why does that
people.
need to be a thing that we describe people as?
She gets a psychic impression of something that's about 40 or 50 feet ahead of her in the bush. She is telepathically connected with Bigfoot.
See, this is the only story that I actually believe.
They begin to, quote, communicate mind to mind.
They mind melded.
Lorraine explained that he had terrified the small settlement when he'd reached out to touch the human child. The creature shook his head, saying that he'd only been trying to communicate. So the Bigfoot tried to communicate with one of the hill people.
Well,
one of the poors.
One of the poor hill people.
And they were scared.
Yeah.
And it hurt his feelings. He starts showing Lorraine images of him standing on a cliff with a hawk on his arm.
A majestic hawk. Like just the wind blowing in Bigfoot's hair.
What an image.
Just this gorgeous
America.
beast of yeah, exactly. Was it a bald eagle?
It was a hawk.
Oh, it was a hawk. Okay. Well, that's good too. We love you. We shout out hawk.
So Lorraine tries to comfort Bigfoot and sends protecting vibes to him and offers to help heal his injuries. But just as she's about to see him, just as he's about to come out of the brush, one of the students blows a horn for no reason.
Oh my God. You mean one of the hill people?
One of the hills. Poors.
Yeah.
Blows a horn.
Yeah.
You know, they're always
They're always blowing horns.
Blows a horn.
Yeah.
And then Bigfoot scurries off.
Yeah. Breaking the mind connection that Lorraine had with him.
And then she went to go and find him, but all she found was a viscous blood on a nearby leaf.
So he was injured.
She was convinced it was Bigfoot blood. And you know what? If Lorraine Warren knew anything about the paranormal, she would have preserved that blood and we would have had DNA evidence of Bigfoot.
No, she
That's
licked
better
it.
than hair.
She went, and then that was it.
She does have a thing for blood. She was really into Padre Pio, who had the stigmata.
I mean, he was a stigmata guy.
And so she had a bunch of that stuff, but she also liked to flaunt a piece of the true cross.
I remember, yes. I think she had it on an episode of Paranormal State once.
Piece of the cross that Jesus was nailed to, she has a piece of.
That she got on eBay.
Had a piece of somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Since those are floating around in the general public.
They said that proof of the creature was easily seen. It was a blood of a type both redder and more viscous than human blood, and it tainted the leaves and grass and foliage.
And she said it tasted like strawberry jam.
Ketchup. Here's the thing, though.
I'm not opposed to, again, and you know, the thing is, I'm not saying that I don't believe that Lorraine was psychic or that she had psychic ability. I think she probably did. She's probably a Catholic woman trying to figure out how to deal with the fact that she was a psychic
you
woman.
Want my opinion?
Yeah.
I think Ed probably ruined any kind of autonomy that she would have had.
Yeah.
I think he probably basically if it had not been for him, maybe she would have been like a cool psychic who was doing cool stuff because she had cool ideas about things.
Yeah.
Once you take the religion out of it, like
you're right. She did have a few instances where she was like, "Hey, wait, what about this?"
Well, get this. Ed had a good idea once in a while too. You want to know what he said about this Bigfoot thing?
What?
This is crazy to me because again, it just. I know, we'll get to it.
It starts off strong, right?
Ed goes on to say, they are tulpas.
All right.
Physical manifestations that are in fact projections of the mind.
Okay, so we have Ed Warren saying Bigfoot is a projection of the mind.
That's us. That's what we think.
A projection. Well, I mean, yeah, a thought form.
We think Bigfoot is a thought form. Mm-hmm. We think Bigfoot's some kind of an egregore created by so many people believing in Bigfoot that it exists.
Yeah.
That's what we think.
Yeah, I think a majority of people's eyewitness encounters are very likely those instances.
But then he goes on to up.
Yeah, as usual. Where's the demon?
Because he says they are creatures of black magic.
Oh, shut the up.
As practiced throughout the world, but most notably by the monks in Tibet. So you say the monks in Tibet are practicing black magic?
Any Tibetan monks want to...
Tibetan monks?
Yeah, I want to jump in on that one.
It is my belief that Bigfoot is a tulpa, a mind projection. So is the Loch Ness Monster and other creatures. Someone who is practicing black magic projects such creatures and we see them.
I think that someone else is projecting. And I think it was Ed Warren.
Could also account for unidentified flying objects.
Did you see me do my stink face arms? I think it was Ed Warren.
But that's what I mean, dude. They are so close. Like, they're so close.
The thing that we also need to...
But they ruin it.
Yeah. The thing that you have to consider, and again, I would like to believe that this is coming from a legitimate place. I'd like to believe that, like, the problem is that they couldn't get over their own religious hangups enough to actually investigate the paranormal. And every time they halfway got there, they went, well, how do we shoehorn that? Like, or instinctively, because it was so much a part of their lives, they shoved it into every single immediate instance that they could, because it's what they would have done. Right?
Yeah.
But it's the dumbest thing ever.
Oh,
Could
yeah.
you imagine saying
so
that
stupid.
Bigfoot is evil? Anyone who thinks Bigfoot is evil.
I don't know that Tibetan monks are evil.
Wrong.
Practicing black magic. Anyway.
We talked about Bigfoot.
Let's end it here.
Okay.
Let's talk about the reason most people know about Ed and Lorraine today.
Yeah.
Is because of the Conjuring films.
Yeah.
It all started with the first one. It's still considered one of the most successful horror films of all time.
Absolutely.
It launched $1 billion franchise. Like, there's tons of Conjuring Universe films now.
It turned them into pop culture figures.
It did. And that's why most people know who they are and why they have a much different, more sanitized opinion of who these people were.
They do,
is because of that first film.
Yes.
That first film in 1971, the Perrin family, mom, dad, and 5 daughters.
Yeah.
They move into a farmhouse out in New England. We've been there.
Yep.
We'll talk about that in a second. They experienced full body apparitions. They smelled rotting flesh. They heard strange sounds. The Warrens initiated contact with the parents, you know, kind of they just start to show up sometimes. And they heard about it from a group of Rhode Island paranormal investigators.
So they heard from some other paranormal investigators, hey, there's this farmhouse, there's some weird things going on.
Ed and Lorraine Warren walked into our house. This is from Andrea Perrone, who we know. We've met numerous times.
Yeah.
It's funny, we'll talk more about Andrea in a minute. She said that Ed and Lorraine Warren walked into our house the night before Halloween, 1973.
Yeah.
My mother and father had no idea who they were when they came to the kitchen door, but my mother let them in. Lorraine immediately said there was an evil presence in the home.
Yeah.
Warrens returned numerous times. Lorraine told them that she had psychically discovered that there was a woman named Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Who was a Satanist.
Yeah.
That lived on the land and sacrificed her children to Lucifer.
Yeah.
So, of course, there's satanic cults again.
Yep.
In order to be able to stay on the land and haunt it forever, she hung herself from a tree on their property.
Why would she want to stay on the land and haunt it forever? Nobody wants to do that.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Lorraine suggested that Bathsheba had taken a sewing needle to her grave.
Okay.
And then was using that sewing needle to torment people from behind, from the dead. Because a lot of people had like puncture wounds in that house going through that.
Yeah.
Now, Here's a weird thing that most people don't know if they've just watched the movies. Andrea believes that it had to do with aliens.
Yeah, she
believes that it was an alien abduction case.
She has her own completely unique idea about what she went through and her family went through. That's unique to her experience, and it has nothing really to do with the Conjuring movies at all.
No, it's very funny. In fact, Andrea has written a series of like 3 insanely thick books all about those experiences, and claims that I believe it was Warner Brothers that put the first movie out, refused her work because it would have been too scary.
Yeah.
Here's the worst part about this whole thing. This is the worst part about this. If you're into the paranormal, you probably already know this. Bathsheba Sherman was a real person.
Yeah.
That nobody really knows much about. She was kind of a hermit. She kind of kept to herself.
Yeah, she was just a
not
lady.
a Satanist. Not here's the worst thing. She lost children in childbirth.
Yeah. I think we can all...
they started saying, Lorraine started saying, no, she was giving them to the devil.
So this poor woman with a unique name, because let's be real, that's where it came from. What? The name Bathsheba? I've never heard that before. It sounds remotely strange and possibly satanic.
There were rumors about her in the town. Like she had been a local legend. So that's probably where she picked up on that.
Yeah.
But like, no, she'd lost children during childbirth. It's a horrible thing for anyone to go through. And she kind of kept to herself. And so they said that she was the reason this was happening. She was a part of a satanic pact, giving her children to Lucifer. And then, the worst part about this is that poor woman can't have a headstone on her grave anymore because too many people go out and bust it up, break it, and
This is another perfect example of how meddling and around in people's lives so that you can sell books and whatever, not thinking about the long-term ramifications. Like this person still has family members.
Yeah, man.
This person has probably family members that are very likely still local all of these years later, and they can't have a headstone on their deceased ancestor's grave because lunatics will kick it over because they believe in Satanists because of the Warrens.
Well,
I'm getting angry again.
Eventually, the Warrens led Carolyn and Roger, the mom and dad, in a seance. Andrea secretly watched the seance and said that she witnessed her mother speak a language not of this world and a voice not her own. Her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room. Things got heated between Ed and Roger. This is a story I've heard firsthand from Andrea. She said that Ed and Roger got into a fight, Ed and her dad, and he ended up kicking the Warrens and their crew out of the house. So what you saw in the movies didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
He kicked them out of the house because they were making the problem worse, he said.
Yeah.
And it ended up with him punching Ed in the face. So like, it didn't end the happy way it did in the movies.
No, I mean,
the dad punched Ed in the face when he tried to stop him from helping his wife.
Yeah.
So rather than helping the family, the parents said, quote, "The Warrens tried to help, but we essentially found that things got worse around them."
Yeah.
And unlike the movie, the parents continued to deal with the haunting for years afterward.
We're not saying that the family wasn't going through something paranormal.
Yeah.
I think it was entirely possible that the family was going through something paranormal.
Sure,
but I think that...
And it's interesting to see that, like, at least one of those family members didn't think about ghosts, didn't think about demons.
Yeah.
It was like, no, this is aliens.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, that's how The Conjuring actually went.
Yeah.
But it made a good enough story.
Yeah.
It's funny because, you wonder, how did they pick this? Why did the producers pick this to launch this billion-dollar horror movie franchise?
So many of them, so many stories.
Apparently Ed Warren knew the producer and he picked it himself.
Oh, that's right.
This had been in the works for years and years and years.
That's right. So you're telling me that they had been kind of like working on and massaging this idea for years and years and years before it ever came into fruition.
Yep. I mean, it took forever for this movie to come out. The movie comes out, ends up being a hit. It grossed $320 million globally.
Yeah, and it was a pretty inexpensive movie. It was the first one that they made. Like it was, they were checking to see if people cared, and apparently people did.
Andrea said that it's an excellent film for what it is, but 95% of it is fiction.
There you go.
95% of that movie's fiction.
Right from Andrea.
Here's something very interesting about this movie. Now, again, they worked on this for years. Ed was long gone by the time that this thing got greenlit. They obviously wanted Lorraine to be a consultant on the film. But in order for this film to be greenlit, Lorraine had a very specific set of rules that she needed. She had a very specific contract. And the contractual demands were this. Her deal with New Line to serve as a consultant on or model for The Conjuring includes unusual restrictions. The films couldn't show her or her husband engaging in crimes, including with minors.
What the Is that a normal thing, though? That's like baked?
Just wait. Including with minors, child assault material, child abuse material, prostitution, or sexual assault. Neither the husband nor wife could be depicted as participating in an extramarital relationship.
Oh, gross. Why would you need that?
And that brings a little extra context to that Hollywood Reporter article.
Yeah.
In the Hollywood Reporter article, they point out that very strange detail.
Oh, they pointed it out in the article.
They pointed out in the article that very strange detail because they reached out to someone who was like a consultant who makes these contracts.
Yeah.
And that person said, no, that is exceedingly strange.
Yeah, it seems like that
is not a normal thing to have in one of those.
So they did that. They did their due diligence.
Sometimes
and they
say,
reached out.
You know, you can't depict us performing any crimes.
Yeah, I mean,
but they're not explicit to say with minors.
I mean, there's a few
child assault material.
Yeah, that's not good.
That's creepy as.
Yeah, that's a really
who were these people?
Disturbing thing to be worried would make it into your movies in relation to your character.
Part of the reason we know anything about those allegations is because there's a big lawsuit that happened. You remember this book here, The Demonologist?
Yes.
This their most famous book from the 80s?
The one that they have that has a good cover.
Gerard Brittle claimed that Warner Brothers movie production of the Conjuring series infringed on a 1978 agreement that he had with the Warrens for the rights to tell their story and talk about their cases.
Interesting.
He ended up suing Warner Brothers, New Line Productions, the director James Wan, and others for nearly $1 billion. $900 million he sued them for.
Damn.
Warner Brothers countered by saying, well, the book's a true story and you can't claim copyright, under fair use doctrine, which is true. If something is historical fact, you can go make a movie about it. Sometimes you have to get people's life rights for certain things, but depending on how public it was, you can make a film about it.
Yeah.
Well, Brittle responded saying something very interesting. Brittle responded saying the book is not a true story and it is entirely a work of fiction.
So the author himself has admitted that this is a totally fake work of fiction.
Said that The Demonologist is a work of fiction and therefore is deserving of his portion of the movie rights.
Yeah.
Brittle's legal team says The Demonologist isn't historical fact because the Warrens lied about what happened in their stories. Of course, this contradicts the intro to The Demonologist, where Brittle says all the information presented in this book is true. These are real cases that happen to real people. It should be stressed there is no exaggeration or hyperbole in the presentation of the phenomenon in this book. So when the lawyers countered with that, Brittle said, well, I believed that at the time, but now, I know I've been duped by the Warrens and I know that they made up everything that they told me.
I see.
So it left it in this, it left this in a really weird place.
Yeah.
But, and this could be the tell, make up your own mind at home.
Yeah.
If you're watching this at home, the suit was settled out of court.
Yeah, I mean...
And that's pretty much where the legacy of Ed and Lorraine Warren ends, is with this massive lawsuit. You can probably see now, after listening to this episode, why we've had such strong opinions about Ed and Lorraine.
Yeah.
Because this is the thing. Every single thing here is in the show notes. You can go read every single one of these news articles. Yeah, every single bit of this.
It's been out there for a long time.
Has been out there.
Pete, one of the things that we did when we were talking about doing this episode is we recognized there's already so many episodes of other people's podcasts that are about Ed and Lorraine Warren and that take on all of this content and talk about it. And we really wanted to be able to talk about this subject matter, but hopefully add something new to it and add something to the conversation about this, because it is such a well talked about subject, really, at this point. I mean,
this is the thing. You've got a million choices when it comes to podcasts to listen to about Ed and Lorraine and who they were. You can fall on whatever side of the fence you want to.
Fans or not fans, people who are trying to be unbiased, people who are absolutely not trying. It's totally up to you. It depends on what you want.
But at the end of the day, we do this for a living.
Yeah.
It is embarrassing to us to be compared to them because we've heard all of these stories.
Yeah.
We have had interactions with a lot of people who've had negative experiences with them.
Mm-hmm. I just vehemently also disagree with everything that they say.
Same. Well, this is the thing. Reading through some of this stuff and like going like, oh, well, they thought Bigfoot's a tulpa. That's cool. But then they ruin it by saying, well, it's those Tibetan monks practicing black magic.
Yeah.
There's a story in one of these books, I can't remember which, that, I reread this stuff later as an adult, and I was kind of shocked at the kind of stuff that was in there. Like, for example, they claim that playing Dungeons and Dragons would get you possessed by demons and make you have with corpses. That's literally in the book. There's another one that's like, oh, this family adopted a kid from India, and he brought his demons of India with him. And it infested the family. That's another thing in one of their books. How racist is that? That's crazy.
Yeah.
The fact that they were so committed to their one particular shtick and they couldn't look outside of the fact that anything anyone experienced that was scary was, maybe it wasn't evil. They couldn't say that. The fact that they could not see any other options, whether it was because of their own personal beliefs that they were imposing on other people, or, I don't know, that's me giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, literally, yeah.
If they were just straight up grifting, using people's religious beliefs to manipulate them to make money, that's even worse.
That's worse.
They're the demons.
Because in the first instance, we could argue that they're also victims. You know what I mean? We could say, like, to a degree, what we're looking at are people who are also or subjected to, obviously they both grew up Catholic, so it was decided for them.
Yeah,
what their religious beliefs were going to be at a certain point. But the latter is obviously a totally different scenario, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they weren't greasy people on both sides of the coin.
I've got a quote here from blogger Angie Berry, who was in a position that I think that a lot of people are in. When they first hear some of these claims about Ed and Lorraine. After they've watched the movies, or maybe they grew up watching them on like Lorraine Warren on Paranormal State or something. We did.
Yeah.
They struggle with whether what they did was forgivable, like whether it was good or not.
Yeah.
Angie says, people haven't died or gone bankrupt as a result of their play acting, which is why most of us can detach the real people from the movie characters and enjoy the Conjuring franchise, which is a solid, satisfying horror series to this point. My friend Emma sums it up nicely. The real-life Warrens are trauma vultures, quick to latch on to anything that implies supernatural interference, while the movie Warrens are precious darlings with a love story for the ages. So, fact or fiction, does it matter when it's quality entertainment? What do you think?
Well, I think that it is probably the opinion that most people who maybe aren't invested in the subject matter would have, because it's people. I like the fact that I think it's very safe to call them trauma vultures. I think that's a good way of putting it. And I think that her opinion is one that is fair to have. The problem is when you are someone like us who are kind of intrinsically invested and connected to the subject matter and have to constantly interact with people who are having these types of experiences, we need to have a much deeper conversation about this. And I think the problem is this is allowed to kind of continue. And I mean, at this point, most people generally, if you've got an interest in the Warrens, you already know about the seedier things because you've likely looked into them on the internet.
Yeah.
But the reality of the situation is that there is so much. They're so problematic, and there's so much they've done to the detriment of paranormal research.
Yes.
That we have to talk about this.
We have to.
And no one really wants to talk about it because there are people still alive who knew them, and there are people, and it's uncomfortable and awkward.
Their relatives are still going around with Annabelle, like having spaghetti dinners.
It's a very, and here's the thing, that's, if we want to consider that that's one very specific part of the paranormal, interest.
Yeah.
And if you're going into it thinking like the way that I can joke about being like, I want to have a spaghetti dinner with Annabelle. I want to have a spaghetti dinner with Annabelle because it would be a funny experience for me to have.
Yes.
It would be an interesting experience for me to have. I'm not going into that experience thinking that I'm going to have a real life paranormal experience or an interaction with a demon.
Oh, I know.
Like I know that what it is
but see,
entertaining.
This is the other thing, though. When you really think about it, if you really do believe that there's a demon trapped inside that box,
why are you bringing it around to people?
Why are you going to go sit there and like have a spaghetti dinner next to it?
Why would you expose it to people who potentially could become possessed?
What a dangerous thing to do.
It's weird. It's like I don't get it.
We don't believe that type of stuff, but there is stuff that we have in the collection that we do think it could cause people harm.
Do you know what it is?
And you know what we do? We don't let people around with that stuff.
It's things that...
There's stuff in the collection that we keep locked in boxes because it is maybe psychologically traumatizing or it is something that has scared us.
Yeah.
And we don't want to scare somebody else with it.
Yes. And that's what it is. It's like I just feel sometimes like I live in a bizarro world as someone who cares about the paranormal the way that we care about it. Sometimes I look around the content and I look around in this space and I'm just I like scratch my head because I just don't understand. The Warrens are they're a wormhole to a very, very deeply irritating aspect of this field of study.
Yeah.
And they really represent something to me that has become a real sore spot, especially as somebody at this point in my life who does what we do. I really, really, really look at a lot of what the Warrens have done in an incredibly, incredibly negative light. And I think that I don't understand how anyone could see otherwise unless you have unless you're doing the exact same thing.
I know.
Are you doing the same thing? Because if you're doing the same thing, then yeah, obviously you're not going to think that they did anything wrong. But if you take a big step back and you look at what they've done to people, the problem is there's a lot of them. There's an enormous mess that they never cleaned up. There's an enormous mess that they never took responsibility for.
They got the paycheck and then they went home.
No, and it's a frustrating thing, I think. Like I realized that for people who came into this episode thinking that like we were going to have fun and talk about the Warrens, and like again, I understand that the Warrens are pop culture figures. I understand that, again, we mentioned earlier that to many people who investigate the paranormal, Ed and Lorraine Warren are folk heroes.
Yes, they're
folk heroes. They're legends. They're deities. They're not even real people to a lot of these people. No. And they have had an impact on many of the voices that have at least in the past 25 years, carved out the process that the paranormal investigators use.
They laid down basically the process for paranormal television and the way that the paranormal is investigated. Yeah. You know, maybe I'm biased. I don't know. I mean, maybe I just know too much. Maybe because this is my job.
Yeah.
I take it too seriously.
Yeah.
But maybe if you believe that they actually took what they were doing seriously, if they actually believed in the evidence that they were collecting, you could make an excuse for it.
Yeah.
If they actually were truly seeking the truth and they were truly believing that they were helping people with what they were doing, maybe you could make an excuse that maybe they were good people or they were trying to be good people.
Yeah.
If you disbelieve the allegations of Judy Penny, you know, if you think that is not real, maybe you could make a case. And if that's the case, I have one more piece of information for you. You know that really famous video, the one that like everybody freaked out, the one that you could only see at their tour?
Oh yeah,
the White Lady of Union Cemetery. In that Hollywood Reporter article, Judy Penny talks about how one time Ed grabbed his video camera, put her in a white dress and said, "We're going out to the cemetery. I just want you to walk through the edge of the cemetery while I shoot you so we can show people what the White Lady of Union Cemetery looks like." And that's the video that he showed during those presentations. It was his mistress, allegedly, in that dress. And that's why he didn't let anybody analyze it. That's why he didn't let anybody see it.
Yeah, the only time people saw it was during a lecture. Yep. It wasn't like, that
stunning photo where it looks just like a real person.
Yeah.
Is allegedly because it was Judy.
I don't know. It's a deeply frustrating thing to talk about.
Yeah. I'm glad we saved it for the season finale. What a high note to end on.
I know. And like, you know, it's just, I don't know. It's really and I only feel like we've just kind of scratched the surface of like there's a lot of processes that take place currently by paranormal investigators that as occultists are horrifying. And there's a lot of nuance that is being left out of this process of investigating the paranormal that the Warrens have directly caused.
Well, I think I put myself in this position, and I think, you know, as somebody, and I'll speak very openly and honestly about this, there's going to be people who might disagree with this, but as somebody who has, I mean, I've literally spent my whole life doing this. Like it's my special interest. I can't stop. I'm a 40-year-old guy who still does this because I do believe it. And I feel like I get closer to the poetry of whatever it is every year. The more adventures we go on, the more we expand our mind, the more that we move beyond our own hang-ups about what this could be. When we push past it and we push past the mapped territory, I am further led to the conclusion that anyone who is honestly seeking the truth about what goes bump in the night will eventually be led to the occult. They will eventually form an interest in the occult. They will eventually start to realize that a lot of the things that people are experiencing are also experienced by ritual magicians, ceremonial magicians, witches, you know, people from different religious beliefs that maybe you wouldn't come into contact with. I think about the Mask episode, which was one of my favorite episodes we've done with the restless face. I think about, like, I would have never learned about these magical practices in Bali and how they believe haunted objects are created. The further that I go, the more I am convinced that you have to leave some room for the occult. It has made me an occultist. Yeah. Being interested and curious and open has made me an occultist. And it's why I believe what I believe these days. And I know that if I was around back then, those motherfuckers call me a Satanist for having an open and curious mind. Yeah. And that's terrible because what they have done is they have stopped curious people from experiencing a bigger world, a less scary world. It's the thing that bothers me the most about anyone who's constantly flogging fear in these spaces is you're stopping people from having an initiatory experience. You're stopping them from becoming better educated about the world around them, from becoming magical. Because to you, being magical is being a Satanist.
It's because it's scary. It's scary.
Don't make everyone else have a small mind too. Help people grow, help people learn, help them solve their own problems. Don't come in and tell them what their problem is. There's many more ethical ways that Ed and Lorraine Warren could have made money with the people that are experiencing these things. They could have made something entertaining that was encouraging people to be curious about the world around them. And that is, I think, the worst sin that they've committed. They are the monsters they were telling everybody else to be afraid of. Because they were trapping people in a phase of belief that they couldn't get out of. Look at the people in that documentary we watched.
Literally, I just get angrier every single time.
Don't do or anything that Ed and Lorraine Warren told you to do when it comes to the paranormal. Choose curiosity instead of fear. Expand your mind. Entertain other ideas than maybe your own personal belief system about things sometimes. Use it as a learning experiment. If your mind is not strong enough to have a firewall against something else getting in, then maybe the paranormal is not for you, because the paranormal is about possibilities. It's about initiatory experiences that will make you believe new things about the world.
And about yourself.
And about yourself.
More importantly, about yourself.
You will be a stronger person for choosing to be curious in the face of fear than listening to hucksters like this, or people who were trained by these people and are still keeping this poison running through the bloodstream of the paranormal. What they have done to the public perception of something so amazing as paranormal phenomena has forever tainted the work of people like us, of, I don't know, actual parapsychologists who are trying to get to the bottom of why people have these experiences, of all of the spiritual teachers out there who are actually helping people embrace a sense of curiosity and understand themselves more and what their own minds are capable of. It wasn't the demons. It was two people from Connecticut. And that is why these are haunted objects. That's it for season 2.
Whoa!
We got to figure out how to get out of here.
Yeah.
I don't like being here. I feel like I'm getting possessed. Let's leave this space. Let's figure out how to get home.
Okay.
I don't know. Who do we need to talk to quantum leap the out of here?
Bathsheba!
Bathsheba!
Please, Bathsheba.
Save us. Maybe
Please
there's a
save
satanic
us.
cult out there that we can get to do a ritual for us
Yeah.
and suck us out of here.
Yeah.
In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to the museum. We have so many cool things happening. Become a museum member. Patreon.com/paramuseum. Just because this season's over doesn't mean you can't have us in your ear holes every single week. Every single Monday for museum members, we have Museum Mailbag where we talk about all kinds of stuff. We'll go into more detail about this.
I'm
we'll
sure
talk
that
about what we've been working on.
They'll have lots of questions we'll be answering.
We read your letters. You should hear some of the ghost stories that we've been telling.
We talk about your ghost stories.
Yeah. Come join the museum. Support the work.
Yeah.
If
Come
you're not
hang out.
subscribed to the YouTube channel here, youtube.com/planetweird, you absolutely should be, because we have some big things to announce very soon.
We do.
We have to go and finish shooting something that everyone's been asking us
I
to
know.
shoot for years.
We're going to do it. We're doing it.
That's the next project. We'll see you later. Adios, everybody.
Bye!
The Haunted Objects Podcast is hosted by Greg and Dana Newkirk, produced by Connor J. Randall, with cinematography and editing by Carl Pfeiffer, and features exclusive artifacts from the Newkirk Museum of the Paranormal. To learn more about the artifacts featured in this episode, take part in live interactive experiments, and enjoy exclusive Haunted Objects content, become a museum member at patreon.com/paramuseum. This has been a Planet Weird production for Spectre Vision Radio.
You think that was too much of a bummer for the end of season 2?
Nah.
I feel like it had to be said,
Yeah,
right?
it did.
I just
It was
kind of want
good.
people to stop comparing us to them, really.
I mean, that would be great.
Well, now we're stuck here.
I know. How do we get out of here?
God, what do you think Connor went?
I have no idea.
Keelin ended up in Connecticut.
I'm hungry.
I'm hungry too.
Did you see that?
Oh no.
Not again.
It's the fog. It stings so bad.
It does.
We have to do this again?
Will the Newkirks ever make it home? Find out in the next season of the Haunted Objects Podcast.